Okay, I hereby call this regular meeting of the Midcoast Community Council on April 8th, 2015 to order. Will the council members please introduce themselves?
Dan Haggerty.
Laura Stein.
Lisa Ketchum.
Dave Olson, and council member Chris Johnson will not be able to be here tonight. He has a family vacation. I believe Aaron Deinsler will be joining us in progress. So, Nicholas, you are up.
Perfect. I don't need the sunglasses anymore. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. So, a couple announcements tonight. First announcement is that next Wednesday on April 15th, there will be a Connect the Coastside public workshop. So there will be a presentation on Connect the Coastside tonight, which is the congestion management plan. The comprehensive transportation management plan. See, I do it to myself. It's the transportation management plan covering the Midcoast and Half Moon Bay. So tonight will be a presentation to the MCC, and then next Wednesday will be a public workshop. We encourage everyone to attend so you can be educated on this, but more importantly, you can provide feedback so we can make sure that we can develop a plan that really works for everyone. As everyone knows, congestion out here on the Midcoast and Half Moon Bay is not getting any better, and it's not looking like it's going to change until certain actions are taken, and that's what Connect the Coastside really aims to do. And so you guys will all receive a presentation on that tonight. Also on this Saturday, April 11th, is a Plan Princeton open house. So this will be an open house that will show the community what the final product of Plan Princeton is. So they've developed the preferred plan, and this will be an opportunity for people to walk and go to different stations to learn about different components of Plan Princeton. I encourage everyone to go. I've had an opportunity to review the preferred plan and go over it with planning, and it's a great plan, and we're looking forward to rolling it out to the community.
You didn't give a place and time?
You are the best. So that is going to be this Saturday, once again, April 11th, at the Half Moon Bay Yacht Club from 1 to 3. Also, the Connect the Coastside presentation is going, the Connect the Coastside workshop, which is a week from today, April 15th, is going to start at, is it 7?
6:30.
6:30. And that is also, that is at Cypress Meadows, that is correct. Not lastly, I apologize. In past meetings, I've been asked whether Caltrans is going to fix the box culvert that is at Surfers Beach, which has been damaged due to erosion and the last couple of storms. I've had an opportunity to connect with Caltrans, and they would prefer to have the repair of that project rolled into the larger Surfers Beach project. However, they need to get funding appropriated for that project, which has not happened yet. The project manager for Surfers Beach is working with the maintenance division for Caltrans, and so we're waiting to hear back as to if they will be able to get funding appropriated for that project. As soon as I find out, I will let everyone know. But Caltrans understands that it's the community and they themselves would like to see that box culvert fixed. I apologize. I'm sorry.
For everything else set?
So for Surfers Beach, it is and it isn't. So in order to get approved and appropriated so that Caltrans can spend the money, it has to go to the California Transportation Commission at their June meeting. Prior to that, we have to secure the Coastal Development Permit Amendment from the Coastal Commission, which will be in May, and we have to secure an easement from the City of Half Moon Bay, which will be at the April 21st Half Moon Bay City Council meeting. So there are various steps that have to take place. We've worked very hard to make sure that everything is lined up accordingly, and we are confident where we are, and we're confident with the process going forward. As we get closer and as stages are completed, I will inform the community and the MCC, but right now things are looking very good. So the money for that project is in the shop budget. It just needs to be voted on by the CTC. One of the things that we're asking the MCC to consider going forward is installing no parking signs in certain parts of Princeton. So one of the things that we have received complaints about is people and other entities in Princeton leaving vehicles parked in the same area for a long duration of time, and we would like to see if there's a way to resolve that. And one of the things we're interested in pursuing are no parking signs at night. So at night, after we would have to work on the details with the MCC. It can vary, but maybe you do something like at night after 10 p.m. No parking in these certain areas until 6 a.m. Something along those lines. So that's something that we'd like the MCC to discuss and consider at one of their near future meetings. I know that we have things booked for, I believe, about a month out, but after that, potentially one of the upcoming meetings after that. And I'll be happy to work with you offline to get you the documentation necessary for that.
We might be able to put that on the May 13th meeting.
Great, thank you. In the past, you guys have heard us talk about the parallel trail and the funding that the county received for Miramar and El Granada, which is that southern segment. So we received $500,000 from the Transportation Authority to start the planning, permitting, and design of that trail. We are interested in amending our approach due to the dense vegetation, the extremely sensitive habitat, and I believe it is Murata Creek. We are interested in pursuing this in two phases. Phase one would be an alternative analysis. Phase two would be the actual environmental and design. The phase one alternative analysis would work to identify what are the appropriate alignments that can actually be implemented. And so we're still kicking that idea around, but we'll bring that back to the MCC when we've locked those details down. But I wanted to at least let you guys know that that's kind of what's holding up this process, as I know I told you guys several months ago that we were going to move forward with that. So, yes.
So I read in the Parks Commission, the report from Sam Hertzberg, a report on this issue, and he said that they were going to look at whether these environmental issues on the east side would warrant moving the trail to the west side.
That's correct.
And so that's the sort of
Yeah,
choice.
that's really what it comes down to. So there are willows and other sensitive vegetation, wetlands, habitat on the east side in the eastern right-of-way of Highway 1 that would make it extremely challenging to eventually construct a trail through that due to the damage that would be done. And so we want to do an alternative analysis to see, are there other feasible routes that would allow the community to get from A to B in a convenient, in a safe, and in an attractive manner, which is what the parallel trail was originally conceptualized to do. And so we're still going to be, those are still the objectives, and we'll use the alternative analysis to see what what options there are on the table.
And that, I'll point out, that does involve 2 extra road crossings and 2 extra Highway 1 crossings, and those are all relatively busy crossings.
Yeah, no matter where you put the trail, you're going to have crossings, right? I mean, we're going to have to deal with crossings no matter where we put the trail, because there are roads on the east side, there are roads on the west side, there are driveways on the east side. So no matter what we do, we're going to have to deal with crossings. That's something that we're going to have to face and make sure that we engineer these in the safest manner possible.
So the first phase is alternatives analysis. This will be laid out. We can see all that.
Yeah, that's how we're trying to design it right now, design the approach. And then today, the Planning Commission pushed back the Planning Commission workshop on short-term rentals from April 22nd to, I believe, they're going to try to do it in May, either the first or second meeting in May. Specifically, the specific meeting has not been locked down yet, but it has been pushed back from April 22nd to a later date. That's Last one. So I had sent that street light. I'd been asked about the street light specs, specifications for the pilot project that we're doing. I'd sent that to the MCC, and some supplemental requests were sent my way, and so I'm working on obtaining that information. And we'll be able to provide that when the community has that. As I told Dave, I think one of the things that is really important is that people are able to evaluate the pilot project on how it looks. How does the LED light illuminate the road, the sidewalk? How does it blend with the residential area? How does it blend with the night sky? How does it look and how does it work? I think it's important that people have an opportunity to see that light and judge it for what it is, instead of trying to look at what are the figures on a piece of paper and come up with your opinion before the light's even installed. One of the concerns is that people are going to say, okay, what's the temperature? What are the lumens? Okay, well, I already don't like it. Well, we haven't put it in yet, so how do you know you don't like it? It's kind of like getting your kids to eat broccoli. So, they're going to tell you they don't like it before they eat it. So we want to keep people's minds open, and we want to make sure that these pilot projects have a fair evaluation from the community. So with that said, I will still work to get you guys that information, but would like to make sure that everyone has an open mind with that. And with that,
Do you have an update on the time frame for the demo lights going in?
Yeah, it really should be any week now. I know I've been telling you that for, 5-6 years now. No, I know I've been telling you that a while, but it was 4 to 6 weeks, about 4 to 6 weeks ago. So it should.
Yes, it should have gone in today, I think.
Yeah, it should be, any day now, but I will confirm with DPW.
So we have part of the specs, and I have not posted anything yet because when I post this, it would be nice if I posted it the day the lights were installed. But what I would also like to include in the post is where you submit your comments. And so I need that information so that I'm ready to go.
And I will get that to you.
Because I'm assuming that the lights will just appear one day. And so when somebody calls me and says, the lights are in, then I'll post it, and I want to know who they should send their comments to.
And I actually think that's a great approach, posting it the day that they're installed. I think, let's say up and running, because I know the light at Virginia.
Oh, that's right, yes.
I know that light at Virginia, which my understanding, it should be running now. When I came back from the last MCC meeting and contacted Public Works, they explained to me that earlier that week they had contacted PG&E to let them know that the light has been installed and is ready to be turned on. And so we were just waiting on PG&E to do that. So that light should be on. I will drive by tonight after the meeting and confirm that.
In Lost Beach at Virginia. So I have a question.
One thing, Aaron, would you come on up? And one other thing before you do that, Nicholas.
Wait,
don't go yet.
I'm moving back to my normal spot.
I wanted to thank you, Nicholas, for working with Dawn to get the election year change on the Board of Supervisors consent agenda.
Oh, of course.
Several meetings ago, we put in the resolution to have the Midcoast Community Council change to even year elections, along with GCSD, Coastside Fire Protection District, and Montero Water and Sanitary District, and those were all approved at the last Board of Supervisors meeting. So thank you very much for working with us on that.
Of course.
Yes, and that's great for those of us who've been here for 4 years already.
So I wanted to ask you to make this announcement, but maybe I can just do it. It's about the crossings, the survey on Speak Out.
Yes.
Okay, so
I'll allow you to do that.
The Midcoast Highway 1 crossings, center turn lanes, medians online survey on smcspeakout.com has been tweaked. It's somewhat improved, and now you have the option to make the survey, comment on a thing without picking an alternative. So you can pick an alternative or not. You can leave a comment or not. Go through it, and if you've already submitted comments on the site, you can click the button that says change your survey, but be aware that that erases everything you submitted for you starting over at that point. But you do have an opportunity to start again. So there's one more week, the deadline's April 15. Just to let you know, even if you've already commented, you might, consider whether you want to update if you were frustrated, particularly your first time.
And for surveys like that, typically what I'll do is put my responses in a Word document so that when the program erases them, I can just copy
still
and
have
paste.
them.
I can copy and paste the ones that I want to that I want to keep, and then I can amend the ones that I wanted to change. Just throwing it out there.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and do we have any other government reports, Captain Mike or anybody else?
I have a question for Nicholas.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Nicholas, the Moss Beach Street road light?
Virginia?
Yeah. Last week you said that you were gonna check with DPW as far as the design standards and it's not matching existing and that sort of thing. Do you have anything back to report back on that?
Yeah, I was told by Public Works that their understanding was that it was installed to current state standards, but that they were gonna confirm that with me, and then I have not connected with them regarding that, but I will add that to my list. But once again, it's our understanding that you have to design it to state standards.
If a car, unfortunately, the accident kind of wandered off at 50 miles an hour, went right into that solid piece of concrete, I don't see that as a standard, so you might want to kind of look into that a little.
Where's this?
I
you're
think,
talking about?
if a car wanders off the road at 50 miles an hour, hits any street light, I mean, it's an issue, but that's why Caltrans doesn't like to put anything typically in the right of way there. I know, in El Camino, on the Bay side, they have issues with that. I know out here they have concerns as well, but typically, you take necessary precautions to make them as safe as possible within reason. I mean, Captain Mike, you might be able to comment better than I on that.
They have specific standards that they have to follow, and the devices that they put in place are generally accepted across the country, not even here within the state. So they look at the individual application, how it would work with the traffic, how it would work with safety considerations, and oftentimes what might be a reasonable placement of something just doesn't fall within the engineering purview, so they just can't install it. So I would really have to defer to the traffic experts, Caltrans, Public Works, as to when an application would be appropriate for a given location. But that certainly doesn't mean that it shouldn't warrant public discussion and consideration and suggestion, so.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll look into that, though. I'll talk with Caltrans and Public Works.
Yeah, a lot of the roadside light poles have a kind of a quick breakaway system. A lot of them do. And this is a solid base, 3-foot round concrete, steel reinforced. It's 4 feet out of the ground. That would hurt. Just something you might want to.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I'll definitely bring that back to Public Works and see what standards they are.
Well, good evening. I'll be very brief because I know you have a very full agenda tonight. And I see our partners from Connect the Coast side, which the CHP is part of that process, and we're very proud to be participating in that. For the first quarter of this year, we've seen a slight uptick in our collisions here within the region. I wish I could attribute it to the weather, but we haven't had any rain, with the exception of maybe 5 minutes yesterday. But what we've seen is kind of the typical trend, unsafe turning movements, which are hard to predict until they actually happen. You really can't enforce those. And in the case of an accident, once one happens, it's usually too late. But DUI is something that we can get on board with. We've seen 9 collisions in the region. The average has been 7 over the last several years. 2 of those collisions are DUI related. So those are the types of things that I want to make sure that the men and women of the Highway Patrol are vigilant toward, and also working with our partners here within the Sheriff's Department. So it's certainly room for improvement, particularly as the nice weather continues and will likely continue to move forward throughout the spring and summer. We want to make sure that we're putting the necessary resources within the region to have a high visible presence and deter some erratic driving behaviors which lead to collisions. And that's really our goal. It's not about how many tickets we write. It's about having a presence so we can reduce accidents, save lives, is really where we're at with that. So with that, that concludes my report, unless there's any questions that the board might have that I would be able to entertain. Or the public.
Oh, I do just have one quick question, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but I was just wondering, do you know if there's any, do you have any information about like neighborhood watch programs? Is that something that the
That's something that's traditionally coordinated through the San Mateo County Sheriff's Department, so I would reach out to their Coast Side Bureau. I know programs do exist within the region, so if you're thinking of starting a new program or maybe expanding on a program, they could certainly provide you with the resources necessary to move forward in that direction.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any information yet analyzing that really bad collision at Coronado and Highway 1, I think last Thursday? When I got there, one of the vehicles was upside down, and the first responders didn't know what happened other than they think that somebody ran a red light there.
I don't have any specific information on it. I could certainly look into that for you, but I wasn't prepared to pull the details on that particular collision. Hopefully the investigation is completed or nearing completion. So by the next meeting, I should have information that I can impart to you in regards to that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. I will move on, I will close the report section, move on to public comment and announcements. Any member of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on an item not on the agenda. The council cannot take action on anything that is said. Bill Kehoe, you are on the slip. Go ahead.
Thanks, board members. Bill Keogh, West Beach. I wasn't going to comment, but when Nicholas started talking about parking in Princeton, it raised a couple of issues I've had for a while. At the last Planned Princeton meeting, or one of the various meetings we've been at when they're talking about Princeton and London, they mentioned that one-way directions of the university streets in Princeton was not well received by the public, and I don't know where they got their numbers from and when that question was asked, but right now, the long streets, the university streets over there, don't have sidewalks. Cars park in front of their businesses where a sidewalk would be, forcing any kind of pedestrian out into traffic. So the idea of putting no parking signs at night, well, I understand that, but a complete solution, you gotta look at the whole day, 7 days a week, and how it's gonna be done. And it almost seems kind of a little bit of a waste of time right now when you're doing Planned Princeton to start throwing these things in and not look for the complete solution. So I think as you look at the no parking signs in general, you have to have the parking solution a sidewalk solution, because I do see women with strollers, young kids when I go through there. They're in the traffic lane. It seems to me you could have a sidewalk on one side, parking on the other, and still a free flow of traffic if there's only a single lane. And we're not asking people to have to drive around the world if they want to get, 2 doors in from the side street they're at. I mean, those blocks are not that long, so you could easily go around the block and pull in again. So to not be considering that and pushing for that in Planned Princeton is really a disservice to the whole community. Thank you.
And Bill, I just want to say thank you. I think those are really good points, and those are points like those are why we bring things out to the MCC and to the community, because you guys have that knowledge, that firsthand knowledge, communal knowledge that we don't. So, I appreciate that, and I hope, Bill, I hope you come to the MCC meeting where we discuss, and I hope other people do as well. I know you don't. When I saw you.
They don't even have cookies. Some of the other boards have cookies.
We accept all donations.
I gave my time.
I would like to piggyback on that just briefly, and that is considering big wave. I think that what Bill brings up is pretty important.
All right. Does any other member of the public wish to speak? Just give your name and pass it. So.
Hi, my name is Karen Demore, and I've been a resident in Moss Beach for 14 years. And I'm here tonight. I know it's a little late in the game, but still I'd like to express my deep concern for the Big Wave project. Its scale is simply inappropriate for our community. And I recognize that this project has wonderful merits, and a housing facility for developmentally disabled adults is something that I would support. But Big Wave seems to me an oversized commercial development scheme that's cloaked in a feel-good project. The Housing and Wellness Center for Developmentally Disabled is a small portion of the project, and yet it's what keeps getting promoted. This latest version of Big Wave would allow for some 550 parking spaces with an estimated 1,479 vehicle trips per day. We're a small community. We only are about 3,000 residents, and then you're going to cram almost 1,500 vehicle trips into small side streets of our neighborhoods. It just doesn't make sense. And there's a frenzy in the Bay Area to develop and build. And for those of us who commute over the hill, we have faced increased traffic, a stressed population of workers and residents, and a general degradation of quality of life. And like others in Moss Beach and Montara, my husband and I moved here for the open space, for the tranquil natural habitats, and the timeless beauty of this area. Residents and visitors and tourists all recognize how unique and magical this place is. There's really nothing like it. And it needs to be protected from severely flawed development projects like Big Wave. So I urge decision makers to reconsider the Big Wave, scale it back. It doesn't belong here in its current state. And I thank you for all your efforts on this and finding a proper solution.
All right, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Please come to the podium, state your name.
Thank you. Sorry, I've got notes here. My name is Carol Keller. I live in what is purportedly the oldest house in Moss Beach. So I've heard all sorts of great stories about the water supply in the neighborhood. And my concern with the Big Wave project is actually the water supply. My neighbor below me had to sell his house at half the price because he had a non-operating well. My neighbor to the right of me has been drilling for water now for 3 years and has spent over $150,000 and not been able to obtain any water from their well. So I'm very concerned about the claim from the Montara Water District that there is sufficient water if we drill for additional wells. I don't believe it. I think it's a good hope, but I am very concerned considering we are in a drought situation, which now means we have half the water supply. The projection that they put out there was based on numbers that were during 2004 to 2014, but currently we are operating at 2/3 the water supply based on the drought. And the reason that we have been using less water this last couple of years is not because we don't have a reason to use water. It's because all of our residents are seriously concerned about the water supply and concerned about the water drying up. And this is a reality for us, and this is something that we discuss on a regular basis. That is why we have declining use, not because we just feel like being thrifty. So 2 weeks ago, there was a statewide mandatory reduction by 20% on the water supply. What I want to know is how is that working into the revised plans for the Big Wave project? What is the county doing about that to preemptively address that issue? How are we preemptively addressing the issue for the water board? Are we scaling back the project to reduce the water supply by 25%? We have to reduce our water supply, which is already at record flows, by 20%. The Big Wave project will be a 5% total at the drought level of our total water supply, which means we will have to make up for that balance on our own water restrictions. And how are these plans being revised to accommodate our having to cut back even more? Instead of 20%, we have to cut back 25%. Are they going to cut back an indoor swimming pool, which seems ridiculous in this drought? Are they going to cut back on kitchens, which use water just for personal use? Why should the residents suffer as a result of uncontrolled development in the area, and especially uncontrolled development that seems to be very heavy in the water usage? 15,000 gallons per day. That's ridiculous in a drought. Lastly, I'd like to bring up the issue of occupied residencies. We already know in Princeton that industrial use properties are already being used as residences. And how are we addressing that issue? How are we making sure that they are not being used with the kitchens as residential properties and using much more in the way of water than they're currently proposing? Which I should add, there was some question on whether or not those water estimates were accurate because there was no prior examples for the water district to pull from. And that is what I would like to say, and I'd like to think that the board and the water district can convince the county to take some action and to reel in this water usage in this time of drought when we really need your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hadn't planned on speaking, but the previous speaker reminded me of something I've been wondering about for a while now. So this is a question for Nicholas. Since the rain is what we expect replenishes the aquifer that 700 wells in El Granada draw from, 700 private wells and probably 400 in Montero and Moss Beach, is the county gonna stop allowing new houses to be built on wells? I heard that they were thinking about it, but it's long past time to think about it. It's time to actually just say no to building new houses on wells. 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember exactly, I think about 3 years ago, I spent a ton of money to hook up to CCWD because I'm worried about that aquifer disappearing. And it very well may if the current rainfall patterns continue. So what's the Board of Supervisors thinking on this?
And Nicholas, I'd suggest deferring an answer on that, unless it's really short.
Actually, so I was, well, yeah. So actually, I was going to actually, no, I'll be honest, I don't know. I haven't had any conversations with Supervisor Horsley. I haven't had any conversations with planning and building on that.
Thank you.
It's an interesting question,
I'll make a phone call.
and I'm sure I'll receive a phone call or an email from you. And please do, as a reminder, because that's an important issue, and I'm very interested in looking into this and getting an answer.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. If there are no other public comments, I will close public comment. Move on to our consent agenda. The only item on the consent agenda tonight is approval of the minutes of March 25th.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the consent agenda. All those,
Oh, it's all right. It's hard to break that habit.
really?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to our regular agenda. The first item is potentially a long one. It's the presentation on Connect the Coast Side and questions and comments from the council. So, the gentlemen want to come on up. We'll get started on that. It's warming up, I think. Dan just turned it on.
Well, thank you, Chair Olson and council members. It's a pleasure to be back here before the MCC again to brief you on our progress. And
Should be coming up right now.
here we go. I like, before we get into content, spend a little bit of time again about what the project is about. Many of you in the audience may not be familiar with Connect the Coast Side, but I think it's also good to remind everyone that this is a fairly unique kind of project. And it's not a transportation master plan for the Midcoast. It has a unique requirement, and that's a requirement of the local coastal program for the Mid-Coast. And the requirement is that there be a comprehensive transportation management plan developed that demonstrates that there will be transportation infrastructure and facilities that can accommodate the growth that is allowed. So with that requirement, the plan is to identify measures to ensure future residential and non-residential development can be supported by the future transportation system and infrastructure. So it is specifically oriented toward looking at what it would take to meet that development and meet the standards and requirements of the community and of the LCP. So keep that in mind because it does make it a fairly unique study. So the specific objectives are listed here: to estimate the residential and non-residential build-out development potential of the Midcoast and Half Moon Bay. This overall program is required within the unincorporated area of the county and the Midcoast, and it's advisory for Half Moon Bay, but we are looking at all of it. We've done that build-out analysis. We've put forth a projection of what that build-out, meaning if everything that got built as it's zoned, what would it look like? And then we've done analysis with that of what the traffic and mobility impacts of that travel would be. And with that, identifying where the standards would be violated by this additional traffic, and then moving from that to identify and evaluate measures to minimize and mitigate the impacts of that growth, and then develop a plan for funding and implementing the transportation improvements. So this is really about looking at that growth, comparing it with standards for quality of transportation in the area, figuring out what would it take to accommodate all that growth with those standards, and so it has that specific purpose. And we'll be coming back to that, and you'll understand why I'm spending some time on that. So we had an outreach event back in October where the public could identify opportunities for transportation improvements. We did our own analysis with the build-out and the traffic analysis of what kind of improvements might address some of the deficiencies. We had a website and a survey in which anyone could log on and put in their ideas. We ended up with about 110 different types of improvements suggested from one or the other of those sources. So we needed to go through an evaluation of those, and we had to do some packaging. And there's different ways of doing packaging to do this kind of analysis. And we decided that since we're really trying to figure out what would need to be done to meet the deficiencies and level of service or standard exceedances with the growth, to look at a low cost, low impact alternative, and then a medium cost and medium impact, and a high cost, to see how far you'd have to go to address those deficiencies. So it was a bit arbitrary in this, but we started that the low cost was really a number of things that could be done in the short term, much of it without significant changes in right-of-way, either the roadway right-of-way or trail or parking, with striping, signage, and so forth. So again, it was a low cost and low impact, both in terms of environmental impact or disruption, but also lower in terms of the benefit that it would end up providing. Medium cost, we started to bring in some other changes, particularly in traffic management, that included an evaluation of potential new traffic signals at a number of locations, as well as some enhancements of the trail and sidewalk network, an enhancement of parking facilities, and so there were capital costs that came into play in that. As well as adding in some fairly significant changes in transit services. The high cost really went to some significant capacity improvement, lane additions on Highway 1, passing lanes on State Route 92, some significant expansions of the trail system and parking facilities. and recognizing that it's, high cost and high impact, both in terms of in some cases, the reduction in delay or improvements in safety, improvements in mobility, but also potential high impact environmental. Just to give you some rough ideas of these packages, and we're still trying to fine tune our cost estimates, and they are only planning level, so these are plus or minus 20% on any one of them. But the alternative one was about a $10 million package. The alternative 2 was about a $50 million package, and the high-cost alternative 3 was about a $150 million package. So we went through an evaluation of the items that were in there, and I believe
for
you.
clarification, was the middle 1.5 or 5?
5.0, I'm sorry, yes. About 50 million. So, and I think you've had distributed, at least to the MCC, our report that we submitted to the Technical Advisory Committee that describes what's in each of these alternatives, and it describes an evaluation that we conducted, and Josh is here because he really did all of that evaluation. In terms of engineering feasibility, design considerations, and what could be done with design standards that are in place, what was the cost of it, both capital costs, maintenance costs, and ongoing labor costs that would be associated with them. But then also the ability to address the deficiencies. The only real defined standards that we were able to evaluate against were traffic level of service standards. You've probably heard reference to A through F level of service, where F is really bad, a lot of congestion, a lot of delay, and A is free-flowing. There are standards for both roadway segments between intersections and what occurs at the intersection. And so for all roadway segments and all intersections, there is some standard that applies. It's either a standard of the county, a standard of the local coastal program, or in the case of Half Moon Bay, city standards that apply. And so we have evaluated that projected growth against those, and then evaluated the alternatives as to how well they would do in addressing those. But there are also qualitative scoring. There were a lot of areas in which there was no set standard, particularly when you get away from the roadway and you get away from the vehicles to the pedestrian, bicycle, transit. There aren't established standards that we can compare to. So our DKS was one of our other sub-consultants, Nelson Nygaard, who is doing a lot of the planning evaluation of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, came up with some other measures and a scoring system that we could at least compare them to each other. And again, there's no standard for the scores that came out, but measuring connectivity of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, access to the coastal shoreline and to within the communities. Safety, we looked at collision rates and collisions by type, whether it involved a pedestrian or bicycle. And then also a precedent had it been recommended in one or more previous studies, and then as I said, capital cost and annual operating cost all came into play in this evaluation. So we went through an evaluation of these three alternatives, and out of that developed what we're calling a proposed hybrid alternative. Now, this is not a recommendation from this study at this point, but it is one set of what we think could be feasible, potentially affordable, and something that might be reasonable for the community, but it's the beginning of the process. MCC will have more opportunity to comment, the Technical Advisory Committee, but more importantly, you, the public. We're having a workshop next Wednesday when this hybrid alternative, as well as information about the other alternatives, will be presented and you'll have an opportunity to comment. The website will be opened up again for comment, and all of this will feed into our evaluation of that hybrid alternative. And so it won't become a recommendation until sometime during the summer, and that, what comes out of that, the elements of that recommendation would also include some additional environmental assessment of the elements.
And one more clarification there. That recommendation in some form, possibly with alterations, would then be adopted by the Board of Supervisors to meet the LCP requirements. Is that correct?
That's correct. And again, that's for the unincorporated area and Half Moon Bay. It's advisory. They could incorporate that into their general plan update that's ongoing, their circulation element, and be part of their policy as well.
And then after adoption, funding and design would start. And so we're looking at a process that will stretch on a minimum of 2 more years.
Yes.
I would think.
Yes. And I'll show this schedule at the end, but at this point now, we're looking for final adoption of a recommended plan by January of 2016. We've had, the initial target was August of this year, but it's, with all of the steps and iterations, and we've mapped it out now that it'll probably be January.
Could you explain to the community about the land use aspect of this and what your timeline is with that? Because I'm not clear if that's coming back to us or not.
As I said, this is about finding a balance between new development and transportation services and facilities. If a plan can't be developed that will address all of the build-out development, then there will have to be some scaling back of that build-out in one way or another until they can be matched up, the transportation and the land use. So Diane and Bhatia, who are on our team, have been working on some land use alternatives that could potentially reduce the build-out. The focus has been primarily on 3 different options that 2 of them relate to subdivisions that have been approved as subdivisions, but only are paper subdivisions. Many of them long time ago, with lots that are smaller than are the current requirements for lot size. So there is a lot consolidation and a lot retirement program that is being evaluated on both to address that issue of these paper subdivisions and what they would add to the build-out. And so they're describing those and evaluating those and what effect they could have in that, bringing down that ultimate build-out. There's also an open space set-aside program that could potentially be a requirement of the plan, that for certain size developments there'd be a certain amount of open space set aside and reducing the total development that could bring down development. EKS, as part of this whole effort, will be also putting forth a proposal for a development impact mitigation fee program, in which any new development would be paying a fee for transportation improvements. So that's not really a land use or growth management, but it could have some effect if there is an additional cost for fees. But right now, that's primarily negotiated transportation improvements when there's development. This would formalize it in a fee program that goes toward a specific set of projects. So those are the issues that are being developed in this land use. It's been, the report has been developed where there's some sensitivities about it. We're trying to address all of those, and particularly right now with Half Moon Bay has reviewed it and made some comments, and hopefully we'll get that resolved and be able to release that and take that to the TAC next Wednesday at a meeting, and we'll be able to come back to the MCC at another meeting to talk about that. So that's it from there.
I have a quick question. I'm
Sure.
trying not to put my head in the screen. I just wanted to find out, since you're talking about transportation issues, was the impact of the proposed Big Wave project taken into consideration when you were looking at, transportation issues and what they might be in the future?
Well, we were looking at a big addition of land use, and in that, the Big Wave is
A part of that?
a part of that. And we were looking at a potential, I believe it was 40% increase in residential, or population residential land use and 50% commercial. So this is for build out, and the build, again, it's, build out is not within a specific time frame, but ultimately, if everything that's zoned were built out, that's what it would be. So we were looking at big changes in that. So it's hard to say it wasn't project by project.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
So,
We'll try and avoid interrupting you
That's
further
all right.
because we have a long way to get through tonight.
so what I'm gonna ask Josh to do, since he's really the one most familiar with the details of this hybrid alternative, is to give you an overview of what we see included in that. The details are in the draft report, and we'll be presenting a lot more details next Wednesday night at the workshop. Josh?
Okay. Now, as Bill stated, the only defined standards that we had to go by were those referring to the level of service at intersections and those along roadways dealing with capacity. Now, for intersections, as most of you are aware, the majority of the intersections along Highway 1 in the Midcoast are not signalized. They are two-way stop controlled. So we have free movement along Highway 1, and the side approaches have to come to a stop before entering the traffic flow. Now, as you can imagine, as traffic increases along Highway 1, it becomes more and more difficult for cars to enter that traffic stream, or even to make a left turn across that traffic stream and get onto the side streets. So what we found, especially at build-out, is that the majority of intersections are operating below the standard. Now, there's three ways to deal with this. Number one is signalization. This offers specific time periods when side streets can have free access to the main road. There's adding a roundabout, which allows all approaches relatively equal access to the intersection, and based on the volumes, the conflicting volumes, is how well that behaves. And then the third one is adding in access restrictions, which as a side effect causes consolidation at specific intersections. So we looked at signalization for any intersection that, number one, was operating below the standard, and number two, met a Caltrans signal warrant. Now, the purpose of a Caltrans signal warrant is to make sure that we are not signalizing an intersection for just a very low volume of side street, and really focuses on intersections where there's a high enough volume on the side street to warrant a signal. Now, also for every intersection that we looked at signalization for, we also looked at a roundabout, as well as several other intersections where there was either community interest in a roundabout or there was a previously studied location for a roundabout. So the number of intersections studied for roundabouts was larger and included all intersections that were studied for signalization. Now, the result of this analysis is that we showed that California Avenue and Cypress Avenue in Moss Beach, and then Grand Boulevard Terrace Avenue, which is in the process of being realigned to be at the same point, and South Main Street in Half Moon Bay, all met signal warrants, all showed an improvement with a signal, and all did not show an improvement, or actually showed a worsening with a roundabout. So those were the four locations that we identified that could benefit from a signalization and not from any other solution. Now, in terms of roundabouts, we located Highway 1 and Coronado Street, Highway 1 and Kehoe in Half Moon Bay, and also State Route 92 and the easternmost State Route 35 intersection right near I-280 as locations that could benefit, at least during some time periods, from a roundabout. Now, that's the proposed hybrid improvements that address the intersection level of service issues. Now, in terms of the capacity, the roadway segment level of service, right now the standard only addresses the volume of traffic on a road divided by the capacity of their roads. We're really dealing with the only way to improve that is to increase the capacity of the roadway or do pretty much a larger scale diversion of traffic. Now, we did look at several possible parallel routes in Half Moon Bay. Several of them had been studied before and had already been dismissed. We looked at potentially a frontage road on the east side of Highway 1. However, for that to be comprehensive and truly move traffic off of Highway 1, it would require the removal of several existing houses, and that's probably not very feasible. So we're left with increasing capacity by adding lanes. Now, it was very important, or it was shown to be very important between community input, between previous projects, that we don't want to see an increase in capacity and therefore an increase in speed and potentially a decrease in safety within the specific downtown areas of the Midcoast communities. So instead what we looked at was the areas between the communities, between previously identified gateways, increasing the capacity there. So we don't see an increase in flow in that downtown area, but we do see a potential increase in capacity and therefore flow and ease of movement between there. So specifically that's between 9th Street and Etheldor, Valamar, and then also between Cypress and South Capistrano. Finally, moving over to State Route 92, I'm sure you all know how congested that can get. Now, adding an entire extra lane for the entire length of that is not very feasible, nor is it necessarily desirable. As many of you know, it's oftentimes slow-moving trucks or individual vehicles that can cause a backup or congestion. So instead, what we look at is where can we add a passing lane. Right now, there's already a passing lane for a portion of that segment. We're looking at an additional passing lane really between Landfill Road and Quarry Road where we see the majority of the truck traffic.
Is that just eastbound?
Yes, that is just eastbound. So also the uphill portion where the trucks experience the most slowdown because of the grade. Moving on, we didn't just look at level of service deficiencies for roadways. We also looked at the broader picture. So safety, circulation. Specifically, there's a couple locations north of Montara, specifically Graywell Cove, where we can benefit from really moving the traffic wanting to enter that parking lot away from the through flow and moving them into a turn lane where they can then safely turn into the parking lot. Also outside the lighthouse in Montara, adding a median and a turn lane there. And then I mentioned this earlier with the level of service issues. The third option is restricting turning movements. Now we looked at both the projects that were studied in the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Project, which involved a large-scale addition of medians, completely blocking access to Highway 1 for several streets, and medians which would block left turn movements. However, we found that the same effect can be had with signage for less of an impact, less of a cost. And for the volumes involved in this area, that seemed more cost effective. Now, that's not to say that outside of the scope of this project, which is mainly focused on deficiencies and build out, that these are not projects that should be continued. It's just for the scope of this project, we found that signage is the best way to address some of these deficiencies. Now moving on, traffic calming as a way to slow down traffic that's moving off of Highway 1, specifically in the downtown community areas. We're talking about Main Street in Montara, Carlos Street in Moss Beach, and Main Street in Ave Alhambra, I believe, in El Granada. Also, one thing about Highway 1 through pretty much most of the Midcoast area is there's no real defined cross-section. We don't have defined curb and gutter, we don't have consistent shoulders, and we don't have, in several locations, even stop signs for some of the side streets. So really proposing standardizing that cross-section, not for necessarily the entire length of Highway 1, but for the specific areas where we do see a large amount of multimodal travel. So not just vehicles, but also bicycle, pedestrian, where it can benefit from that standard to increase safety and to increase sort of access. And then finally, outside of the public roadway entrances to Highway 1, really adding in consolidation. So earlier I talked about a full frontage road along the entire length of Half Moon Bay, which was infeasible. However, in specific locations such as Nurseryman's Exchange, we can take, I believe there's like 4 or 5 driveways, which all enter Highway 1 in close proximity to each other. If we can take a frontage road, combine that all into 1 or 2 locations where we can consolidate that volume instead of spreading that along, we can really increase safety in those locations. And then moving to State Route 92, besides the trucks that can add to congestion, there's also several businesses along State Route 92, especially close to Main Street, where traffic can back up while cars wait to turn left into those businesses. So adding in left turn pockets, making sure that they're long enough to accommodate the demand that accumulates, but really, once again, similar to the Great Wall Cove, removing them from the through traffic stream. Now, off of roadway and onto bicycle and pedestrian improvements. I've separated these into high priority and I want to say low but medium priority improvements based on their effectiveness. But number 1, the parallel and coastal trails. These have already been in study. These are very important to provide a full connection for bicyclists, pedestrians through the entire area. So they were very high on the list. Adding sharrows, which is traffic lanes which are also striped for bicycles to have access on those main community streets. This removes the bicycles from Highway 1 and puts them in a safer situation. Now, we're not, the parallel and coastal trail will provide more of a recreational space for bicyclists. The sharrows on the main community streets off of Highway 1 would provide more of a commuter or non-recreational bicycle use. So we want to make sure that we're really addressing the needs of all the users for the area.
I'm sorry, is Capistrano Street the same thing? Is that the one south of Woodford?
Yes. Yeah. And that has 2, it's basically a loop. So yes, the next one is adding a bike lane. Now this would be a class 2 bike lane, so we're not talking about a separate trail, such as the parallel or coastal trail, and we're not talking about a class 3 or the sharrow where they're sharing a lane with cars, but a class 2 bike lane is where there's a specific right-of-way for bicycles, but it's paved and it's in the street right-of-way. And then also, and I think this is actually one of the most important ones, is adding designated striped crossings in many locations along Highway 1 and State Route 92. And that's striped crossings with signage, with beacons. So we're talking about safe locations that are designated for pedestrians to cross Highway 1. Right now, there are very few locations like that, and as a result, we see pedestrians crossing pretty much wherever. So this is definitely a safety concern. Consolidating these crossing locations and adding improvements which will notify drivers that there are pedestrians crossing is a huge safety improvement. Now, lower on the list, a bike lane on State Route 92. while there has definitely been community support and expressed interest for this, this needs to be paired with really a focused demand study that will identify what the usage of this will be. And that's mainly because it's a very large improvement. You can't put a bike lane on part of State Route 92 because everyone that wants to use that really wants to go from close to I-280 all the way down to Half Moon Bay. So it's really a project that has to be done along the complete length. So it's a significant investment. Adding traffic signal updates for pedestrian and bicycle safety. This is making sure we have bicycle detectors at traffic lights, making sure we have countdown timers, all of the little things that can be added to a traffic signal which improve the safety for users that aren't vehicles. Bike lane on Airport Street. This is similar to the one that I mentioned along Capistrano. However, this is a longer segment, which is in addition potentially to the coastal trail, to the parallel trail. And then finally, this is paired along with what I talked about with the roadway of having a consistent right-of-way, especially where we see a lot of multimodal travel, is having sidewalks. So we want to make sure that there's a place for the bicyclists to drive, there's a place for the traffic, and then there's also a place for people to walk. Moving on to transit, the highest priority improvements we found was number one, improving bus stops. Right now, in the, I believe, 77 bus stops that I counted in the Midcoast and Half Moon Bay area, all of them are just a sign on a post. So now the full improvement of a bus stop would include a shelter, it would include bicycle racks, notification of when the next buses would come, lighting, a concrete pad for the bus to stop out of traffic. It's actually very involved in a very expensive undertaking. Now, of course, the bus stop can be any range in between there. Now, Samtrans policy is that a bus stop has to have 100 to 125 daily users to warrant a bench and 250 to warrant a shelter. Now, obviously, we don't have that sort of demand, or else there would already be benches and shelters there. Now, talking to Samtrans, the two ways to then provide shelters or at least benches in these areas is number one, coming up with a specific standard for the coastal, rural, Midcoast area. Number two is, as part of this project potentially, coming to a special arrangement with Samtrans about where these improvements would best be needed. Now, along with this, there needs to be, once again, a focused demand study that identifies which locations are in the highest need of these improvements. To put them everywhere is maybe a bit overkill, but we really do want to identify potentially in the future where the locations are that can best improve from this. Now, moving on from this, adding shuttle bus service during special events. We're talking Mavericks, we're talking Half Moon Bay, the Pumpkin Festival. We're talking about the situations where the regional recreational traffic that comes into the area is so high that residents are not able to easily move around. So if we can then provide alternative ways to travel within the area that doesn't require driving by car, that doesn't require parking, then that's definitely something that can improve. Okay. Also, combined with that is park and ride, places where you can park and then get onto the shuttle bus. Now, the lower priority is really a full-scale increase in Samtrans service. We've talked to Samtrans and gotten some estimates for this, but that's something that has to be done sort of in conjunction with Samtrans. And then finally, school bus service. It's been discussed. Obviously, the community finds great need with this, but it would also include the acquisition, the storage, and the maintenance of a fleet, or the working with a private company to obtain that. So that also requires further study. Finally, the parking improvements is really taking the locations where there is a demand for parking and there's currently not existing supply or underutilization of parking and formalizing that parking. And then it depends on how overutilized that is as to the priority for that.
What we found through our analysis of the three initial alternatives and our assessment of the hybrid is that most of the improvements considered would be cost-effective ways to improve vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle mobility, safety, and access. They're all good ideas and worthy of consideration. But even under the most extreme set of improvements, and certainly in the hybrid, it doesn't address all of the build-out deficiencies. Part of that is because even now, there are a lot of places that violate the standards, and so growth just adds to that, and there isn't enough that can be done. So then what happens, that's when we really need to look at these land use alternatives and how much effect they would have on reducing that build-out estimate, and if there are other land use options that would be required. But another possibility is looking at changing the standards by which this is all judged. And again, some of that is in the LCP, some of it are county standards, and some of it are Half Moon Bay standards. But that is an option as well, are accepting, particularly on the highway side, the roadway side, a worse level of service for that. So that's where we are. This shows the overall schedule. As I said, we're really looking to get final adoption of the plan by January of 2016. We're in this long process of developing and evaluating the alternatives now, and this will, with the input that we get next week, and from you, and from the additional input from the TAC, move toward a recommended plan in about May, and begin an environmental assessment of that, and at the same time developing implementation strategies for the plan, including the proposal for a fee program, but also responsibilities and steps for implementing the plan, and those would proceed in parallel until about October, when we would be going to the board. Now, there will be a public hearing sometime in probably late August to avoid, wait till school is back in, or early September for a last public workshop to consider the draft plan before it moves forward to the Board of Supervisors. So that's where we stand, and that's the hybrid alternative, and open it up for questions.
Before we move on to questions, I want to point out, we do have the public workshop next Wednesday, so if you have detailed comments on something, I would like to ask you hold them until the public workshop. Clarifying questions, I think, are good, because that will help them prepare for the workshop. If you have really brief comments on something you think has been missed completely, and hopefully you've looked at the 200-page document, which goes into a lot more detail than this presentation. It has a lot more stuff than is here. So hold on a second. So we'll start with the council. Again, keep it brief. When I open it to the public, if you have something to say that somebody else has already said, but you have some slight clarifying comment, try and keep it to just the clarifying comment. So I know Lisa has a number of questions that she's already sent. Is there something that you would like to start with, Lisa?
Well, Laura and I, Laura's the rep on the TAC, and we had submitted comments to the TAC on the draft that was released in early March, and we haven't heard anything back. We haven't seen a new draft. So I just wanted to just briefly cover a couple of those points for the public to hear as well, and these are still, they're things we would like to know more about. Maybe you'll have this by next week. On the 4-lane, widening to 4 lanes. We'd like to see aerial photo footprints of where this would go, the height of the retaining walls that would be required, what type those would be, I noticed just this time it's changed. Before it was from 9th to Carlos, now it's 9th to Valimar. I presume that changes your cost estimates. Basically, the extent and cost of sensitive habitat mitigation, the analysis of the effect on bike lanes, trail routes, and crossing difficulty for this widening section. And the other part of it is that how is the decision made to widen only those specific segments? It seems counterintuitive and contrary to previous practice to widen to 4 lanes outside the town centers, and then everybody has to merge down when they get to the town to the 2 lanes, and what's the impact of that backup? And I mean, basically the section along the airport is our most freely moving section, and that's the section proposed for widening. And then the section between Moss Beach and Montera is, you've got great, you're gonna have to just cut out the whole hillside, put in retaining walls. We might lose. What that does to Carlos Street, I don't know. I mean, this is where if we had that footprint to see that. I mean, we're working on another project right at the moment, deciding on alternatives for crossings and whether we would put medians and widen the road by like 5 feet to accommodate that. And it's like, oh my, that'll be so disruptive. And it's like, if this is going to happen between the towns, it's like kind of a different perspective. So some more detail on that would be useful, and and how that also would help the segment, since you have to merge back down. The Moss Beach.
Can I make just one point about that, because it really raised what I said before. And these are not our recommendations. These are a hybrid alternative that we're evaluating, an alternative that we're evaluating to see whether it would result in meeting the standards. One of the solutions to what you said is change the standard. Change the standard on those roadways, or eliminate the standard, and the need for the project goes away.
Well, that's another question to say, well, here's your traffic, get used to it. I wasn't going there. I was just wanting to know how these widening was going to help.
So can I quickly interject something there? I think that one of the things that people need to remember is these levels of service are intersections and segments between intersections. So my guess is that the proposal for the 4 lanes improves that segment.
Yes,
but
it
what
does.
Lisa is saying, and what a lot of people on the coast have experienced, is if you do that, you need to consider the traffic effects between 2 segments where it changes.
Basically, Laura and I have been through the whole document carefully, and what it does is when you widen those 2 segments on the map, then those segments show up green. But then you still have the issues in the towns, but then what's not shown is what's the effect of this merging back down before each town and how that affects it. But so then also when you analyze the roundabouts and said that Cypress wouldn't work, you were analyzing a single lane roundabout at Cypress, and you did not analyze a double lane roundabout there. And since you're proposing that 4 lanes of traffic are going to come right up to that roundabout, and it seems like you should analyze that for a double lane roundabout before you discount that. Basically, Moss Beach is unique in the Midcoast because the highway bisects the town, and the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Study for Moss Beach had a concept of a village area between Valimar and Cypress, which was defined by traffic calming medians with a roundabout at each end, so that you would have a convenient U-turn, so that you wouldn't need to make left merge turns onto the highway. And that concept is not considered in this plan, and instead it seems as though the focus was more just focused on individual intersection and the level of service there, and out of that we got a signal at California and a signal at Cypress, and pretty much that's all Moss Beach gets. And it's like we all know how signals impact congestion on the highway. And then also I had made some comments on some low-cost near-term projects that could be done next week, basically. And this came up in the highway crossing study, that at Cypress, you could swap out one of the left turns there so that the busy, the real low LOS traffic could merge onto the highway going north at Cypress. And everybody said, that's great, all we need to change the arrow. So, but there's two more places you could really help Moss Beach. One on each side of the downtown area to do this same swap. Give up a left turn lane and make a left merge lane so that on each side you'd have an opportunity. For example, at California, so you can merge going north, you can get out of there. And say, for example, on the east side of Vermont, you could merge left and go south. And then we also had comments about at the lighthouse at 16th Street, and this is something that Midcoast Council has been asking for years now. At every study that comes along, 16th Street, what has it got, 2 or 3 houses on it? That's it. And there's already a dirt connection with Carlos. Just formalize that and move their access to the highway over to Carlos, and therefore at the lighthouse where Montero Water Sanitary comes in, you can swap out that left turn lane and put in a left merge so people can come out of there. And I'll stop now, thank you.
All right, I'll take Aaron next.
So one quick thing, so I just wanted to find out some of the proposed changes, some of the improvements, for instance, like let's say putting in a roundabout. Does the study also look at the impact of construction on traffic? In other words, like, I don't know how long it takes to actually put in a roundabout or any of the other proposed improvements, but clearly that will impact traffic while construction is going on.
And that will be handled during the environmental assessment that goes on during the summer. Once we have a preferred alternative that's moving forward.
Okay.
And we're not there yet. We're putting out these alternatives to get comment before moving on to that.
Okay, because I just, like, for instance, in Pacifica right now, they're doing some improvements there, and the way that that's impacted traffic has been horrendous. So that's one of the things that I would find, especially because I'm one of the people that commutes every day on the 92. So it's kind of like, what's the impact of improvements on existing traffic?
But that will be studied.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, take Laura next.
When you were talking about changing standards, I was somewhat confused because at one point I was under the impression that they were looking at taking our level of service and redefining it. So making it okay for level of service F. We'll just say it's level of service D, and then everything's gonna be fine. So could you help me understand that?
So, and it's not clear where all of that is going to go, but where the State Office of Planning and Research, I believe, has been at the forefront of this and has recommended this for CEQA environmental analysis at this stage. That the request is to eliminate level of service as a criteria for impact in CEQA analysis, while at the same time suggesting that other measures be used. But at this point, there's nothing that would take that out of the LCP or the existing standards that the county and Half Moon Bay and the LCP have. So at this point, they're all still there. They're all still used. And the requirement for this project requires us to use the standards exist. So there would have to be some action to change the standards by which the growth is evaluated, and that hasn't happened and probably won't happen for some time as a result of the state's actions.
Right. Just to clarify that too, for example, the CMP, when it makes standards, it's not always a fixed standard. It is this standard or whatever the current level is. So one of the things that Bill mentioned earlier is that many of the locations at existing conditions are already past the standard. So in terms of trying to come up with something that then brings it back under the standard when we're still seeing growth, we're still seeing a changing environment, becomes impossible. Or at least without very large improvements. So it's really do you get rid of the standard? Maybe, maybe not. Do you acknowledge the current level of the traffic when you are then looking forward? Maybe that's what needs to be done. So it's really recognizing the full situation and not just blindly saying this is the standard, anything past it is a deficiency.
Okay, so you would be saying, you're saying it's not, so you'd be saying it's not a deficiency when it is?
Well, you'd be redefining what a deficiency is.
And its impact on future growth.
And its impact. So
Okay.
the point of standards is when you have something that is going to change the environment, to determine how much of an impact that project has. So if we have it's not just to look at the existing situation and say, well, there's a lot of delay. But it's really as a metric in order to look at future projects. So if you have a situation where everything's already past the standard, you're losing your ability to judge future projects. So you're trying to turn it into something more meaningful.
Thank you.
Anything else, Laura?
No, that's all.
Dan?
Yes, I think you're probably gonna find a lot of comments about not doing any capacity, using any capacity increase tools, but using a lot of congestion reduction tools. One of the things, the Graywell Cove, you had a no left turn sign on your slide, yet you had the left turn in and the left turn out of the Graywell Cove. That I know, I've personally experienced that as being a very a pinch point for getting out of the area on a weekend night. I've seen sometimes, I've heard reports, 45 half hour to get from the airport to Montera. Everybody's coming in and out of that has a lot of impact. So
Dan, this is the kind of stuff that they have considered and I think should be addressed next.
Well, the question is the left turn sign.
I do want to clarify that. Those two images were for two different bullets. So the image of Graywell Cove was for Graywell Cove, and the no left turn sign was for the bullet that was talking about restricting left turns out of the side streets.
Okay.
So those were for two different things.
The sidewalks, are they urbanized style sidewalks that you're suggesting?
That's, really to be up to the community to help decide, the policymakers to decide. We're encouraging or proposing pedestrian facilities where there are none.
Okay. And on pedestrian crossings, we've seen some designs on the past. There's a number of them out there. Can you talk about ones that you have?
Okay, Dan, I'm gonna cut this one off because we had a whole meeting on that one. So we had the safe crossings meetings. I have to assume the safe crossings plan and meetings will feed into this plan, and this plan will not override that unless they see a major issue. Is that a fair assumption? Okay, so I don't think we need to go over all the safe crossings issues again.
Okay, I like the shuttles, transit improvements, shuttles. Good idea.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I have a couple of very minor ones. The California Street intersection in Moss Beach is a 5-way intersection. It would be extremely difficult to signalize that. That neighborhood on both sides connects to adjacent streets. If for some reason a signal was decided to be necessary, I would strongly suggest you move it to one of the cross streets adjacent. Virginia, Vermont, California, because it has Winky Way coming in as a 5th street, would be very, very difficult to signalize successfully. Another issue that has been commented on multiple times on the coast is shoulders and sidewalks are more or less okay with people. People do not like curbs. So putting shoulders along the highway without curbs would be preferable. And if you're putting in sidewalks as well somewhere, put in sloped curves, not straight up and down curves. People have spoken out very strongly on that issue. Okay, with that, unless somebody else on the council has something else to clarify, I'm going to open it to public comment. I've got 3 speaker slips already. The first person will be Fran Pollard. The second will be Bill Kehoe. Fran, you're up.
Well, I kind of have a letter, so I don't know if it goes with this conversation.
Okay, I'm asking people, please hold as much as possible to clarifications and issues that you think they have missed. If you have long comments, they should probably go on the website, and I'm sure they will be happy to take letters as such as well.
Okay. Well, I said this at the meeting last year, that I think most people don't want to see a lot of signals on the coast. So in order to overcome that, I think we need to have these islands, short, narrow islands, not big, long things that take up a mile or whatever. And that would make it easy for people to cross one lane at a time. This is for safe crossing again. So, and also, I did add something that I hadn't said before. I think, that's not my letter. Okay, I want to add this right now. We are in a very different and critical space at this time, namely the most severe drought ever seen in California, even though it's only 3 years so far. I remember a few decades ago, we had a 6-year drought, and it wasn't as severe as this one. And that's because there was half the population at the time, or maybe even less, which brings me to another point. Specifically, we should not even consider the continuing plans for a wider highway and a bigger and more urban-type infrastructure to accommodate an ever-growing population. We must insist that our legislators pass a bill or resolution to declare a moratorium on large developments here, locally, and in the entire state until this drought ends and we have a sufficient water supply, because at present we simply do not have adequate water for current residents, let alone many more future residents. And I think we have to stop this continual growth and continual planning for that. And then we can have a decent highway and a decent plan. So I'm just going to add that right now. I don't know, I could submit the letter or I'll do it next week. I'm glad we're having a workshop because I was going to suggest that, so we can talk among ourselves.
All right, Bill Kehoe, you're next, and following Bill will be Leonard Warren.
Okay, Bill Kehoe from West Beach again. First, I have a clarifying question. When Laura was asking you about changes to standards that could be made, I almost think I heard you say that, and I know you weren't recommending it, but did you say something along the lines of, well, you could change the CEQA process?
No.
I think the comment was.
Because I can go back and watch this on film, because that's what I heard.
There are state bodies suggesting that the CEQA requirements around things like level of service be changed.
Okay, hopefully increased. There's a whole lot of issues around CEQA and the way the city, the county, and special districts around here already manipulate that process. And as a member of the Advocates for Open Government, we are looking into that now, and we're going to start more action on this, so don't even go there. Okay, number one, process. Very complicated document. I only looked at it Sunday when it appeared in a link inside of an email, so I have not digested it all, but my eyes popped out when I got to page 29 and I saw the 4-lane highway in Morris Beach, and I'll get to that next. So the process for this is, I'm glad you're here talking now. The audience, the public, this isn't really what the MCC was formed for. It's supposed to be where the public is on an equal footing with the council and get to ask questions so they fully understand. So with all due respect to you, Mr. Chair, Where a crossing is in Moss Beach, as someone who's lived there for 30 years, it makes sense to be at California where 90% of the people on the east side cross the street. You can put it someplace else, but they're still going to cross at California. So figure out how to fix that. Don't move it where nobody's going to use it. It's the way they did streets in Boston. Follow the cows, put it in there. Number two. Don't confuse me, it'll take me forever. I already have a memory problem. So the four lanes south of Morse Beach and 4 lanes north of Morse Beach tells me that we're now going to have people barreling into Morse Beach in both directions, breaking the speed limit. Right now, the speed limit is 50. As someone who's been trying to cross at California and Highway 1 for 30 years, those cars are flying by at more than 50. And you know that the sheriff's department, which is right there, they don't come out to do anything. So, it's absolutely ludicrous that we're going to, in fact, the speed limit and the speed through Morse Beach went up when they repaved it and striped it, because now it looks like a 4-lane highway, and that's the way people drive. We have no calming effects. And someone here just mentioned before that we wanted to have, safe refuges in the street. And we're going to have to widen the street. And then that scared people up because they thought, oh, that's 4 lanes. That was another process which, again, was not done correctly. So people get the misconceptions, they answer wrong, or they press the little clickers. So we're getting bad data that we're going to be making decisions off of. So this isn't really what the council should be doing. This isn't the way the process is supposed to go. And I know because I helped form the Midcoast Community Council in '89. I know the bylaws. So go back and look at them and start following them. Finally, I think you really need to have a lot more public input, and you've got to break this down into chewable chunks where we get to analyze each and every change you're going to make, where people are going to have their chance to say, we all get to listen, and we find out what's the best solution bubbling up from that. We had a discussion in email with a bunch of people about the safe refuge from last week, and there's different ideas about it, but in the end, people were just asking for an aisle in the middle so that they go 1 lane at a time, which is much safer to cross. And what do we get? We get flashing lights, we get push buttons. Now I'm hearing signalization. Nobody in the public ever asked for that. And yet we get choice A or choice B again. And we don't want that menu. We want a different menu. Nicholas, take this back to Supervisor Horsley. This is something that I'm not going to let go of. And it's also going on in Half Moon Bay. We're following what you're doing down there. I have a lot of friends that have been working on that. And that's why I know a little bit about this. We don't like what's coming here. And the last thing I'm going to say, the elephant in the room that we all know about, is this whole game being played about level of service is to increase development. I said it. Everybody yell at me. Don't vote for me next time I run. But it's here to increase development.
Thank you, Bill. Leonard Warren, you're up. And I do want to clarify, when I requested people to hold it to clarifications, if it's something appropriate for the workshop, I'm not telling you that I'm requesting it.
I think the most important thing is the land use issue, and one of the things that I've been saying for a number of years now to a deafening silence is the quick fix is to rezone all of the residential to reduce the maximum house size that's allowed. So there's no takings. This has been litigated at the U.S. Supreme Court at least 3 times, and you can downzone all you want as long as some use is left. And so you cut in half or less the maximum house size that's allowed, and you solve the build-out population problem to a great extent. We're already way past where we should be. If you look at the vacant parcels versus build-out parcels and the build-out population specified in the LCP, and you do the math, we're 50% over where we should be. But the biggest thing that you haven't addressed at all, aside from that, is adding lanes to the highway. All that capacity is going to be sucked up by the current demand, which is compressed right now. And you make the highway 4 lanes all the way along now, it'll be full instantly. And so then if the county claims we're at 50-something% build out in the low 50s, what does that mean? 8 lanes at build out? We're not going there. So you have to get a control on the population, and that means rezone the residential way down. And you need to go study the build-out population in the LCP, the estimates, because we're already just about at the final build-out population estimate in the LCP. Signals. There is no possible way you can install a signal that doesn't increase congestion. It can't be done, especially when you put in these idiot things that are 8-way signals because of all the left turn arrows. They all need to be yield on green, so that when there is a break in the oncoming traffic, it can turn instead of waiting for the stupid left turn arrow. And that's a major problem down at Frenchman's Creek in particular. And so Coronado and Frenchman's Creek need the storage lanes put in. You haven't addressed that at all. You kind of waved at it on your way by in your presentation, but absolutely no signals. I'll appeal every one to the Coastal Commission and tie it up for years. No new signals until there's storage lanes put in at the 2 existing ones that were done wrong. That's a critical issue. Look at Capistrano, which has a much higher cross-traffic flow. You don't have the congestion there because it has the storage lanes. And by the way, Capistrano is 7 lanes wide there. Is that what we want for the highway, 7 lanes? And the other thing with widening the highway, adding lanes, and you didn't cover this at all either, is it's going to make it that much harder for pedestrians to cross, and then there's going to be more of a demand for signalized things that stop the traffic, and now you've lost all the benefit of adding the lanes. So there's no point in adding the lanes. It's just not going to improve the situation. The situation is caused very largely by the fact that there's too many people here. Uphill passing lane on 92 doesn't work because there's no prohibition against the slow trucks going in the left lane. So you get a truck going 9 miles an hour passing a truck going 8 miles an hour. They need to be hauled off to jail for that, okay? That needs to be not allowed. I've been asking for signage there that says trucks right lane at all times. Nobody ever listens to that. You need to get the signs up. The County Board of Supervisors has to formally ask Caltrans to put up a sign that says trucks right lane at all times. And slow traffic keep right. I don't even know if that sign is up there. I wonder if you guys have actually looked at the LCP. The LCP incorporates, by reference, the 1978 Montero Moss Beach El Granada land use plan, which pretty much says no sidewalks. There's a deviation allowed in El Granada, which is not taken advantage of anymore, really. Nobody builds sidewalks. But basically, you need an LCP amendment before you can even do sidewalks in the communities here. I think that's probably it. I really whizzed through it, but I think I hit everything I had written down. And if not, you'll hear from me next week. Except that there's a conflicting meeting I might need to go to.
So Josh and Bill, by the way, if you want to respond to any of these, just let me know before I bring up the next person.
This is where we're getting input. This is all very good.
All right, the next and last speaker slip I have is Carl May. After Carl, I'll ask if anybody else wants to speak. But if you do have speaker slips, go ahead and send them up. Carl, you're up. Thank you.
Well, I've lived on Carl May, Moss Beach. I've lived on the coast side since mid-'74, and I've experienced dozens, literally, of county programs, projects, studies, whatever, being forced onto us. And I know you're doing your job, and you're doing the best you can, but you're representing a government that tends to want to impose things on the coast side. And their associates in this are a very few developers and construction companies and so forth who tend to benefit from this. And even the last county LCP, which you briefly referred to, was a setup job. Even the public meetings, the few developers got equal voice with the whole rest of the public. So we always look upon these things as being imposed on us when they're coming from Redwood City. This is no different. To some comments on this one in particular, I didn't see no project alternative being presented. Would you like to think about possibly the benefits, the cost savings, and so forth of the null hypothesis on all of this? They're huge. There's an assumption that the build-out figures that are in the current LCP, which was done by a couple of county supervisors because they didn't like the version that got up to them, which was already stimulating overpopulation, but there's no consideration, and you did mention this very briefly toward the end when you said all of this wasn't still going to come up to snuff, but a very easy thing to do is reduce the arbitrary build-out procedures. You talk about these maps like we have up in Monterey Sanitary Districts and so forth. It's assumed that there's going to be a house on every little subdivision map with 25 by 100-foot lots and so forth, and they've been using these to push build-out ideas forever. Get rid of some of that. Be stronger about lot consolidation, so forth. Brief mention, the parallel trail was originally even called a transportation trail. It's not supposed to be a recreation trail. So forget yet more bike stuff when the parallel trail was intended to be the faster bike traffic and so forth between community centers. Everything I heard you mention is in the way of urbanization. I didn't hear a single suggestion that didn't involve pavement, widening, hardscaping, and so forth. Are you taking it into account, for example, a real problem on the coast side now, runoff from too much hardscaping in parts of our territory? I would like to mention that all these, when you say improvement, that's a matter of opinion as to what constitutes an improvement for a community. Call it like it is. These are developments, urbanized developments that you're talking about. They aren't going to improve our communities in any cases. They're going to impose a new urban setting on them. So they're development. They're further development, not improvements. Along this line, we have in the Coastal Act a section that says Highway 1 in scenic rural areas shall remain a 2-lane road. The areas that you're talking about 4-laning between the town centers are our scenic rural areas. You want to comply with the Coastal Act, you keep them 2 lanes. And finally, I worry about these big transportation schemes going on into the future in terms of the scope of development that's being forced here with a total lack of water to support any of this. We're barely trying to have a balance or break even in Monterey and Moss Beach, and that's one of the few places in California that even does that. In this scheme, I see the possibility for developing transportation nodes that you're talking about, where these various trails, roads, and so forth come together, especially in the little urban centers and so forth. That's a setup for SB 375 development. SB 375 development then, which stimulates what development there's supposed to be around transportation nodes, this leads to more development. And the kicker there is, yes, it gets out from under some of the environmental requirements, the CEQA requirements, and so forth. It's fast-tracked kind of development, this SB 375 stuff. And this development plan creates the possibility for some of that SB 375 stuff being imposed on the coast side. So, those are some of my general concerns.
Thank you, Carl.
I just want to make 2 clarifications. The no project would be, we already submitted a report several months ago, which was the existing conditions and build-out analysis. So that would be the no project alternative.
Did it talk about the benefits of doing that?
It was an analysis of the conditions, similar to how
Did it
this,
run down the benefits?
similar to how this project is also an analysis of the conditions. Also, according to the LCP, the entire study area is okay to expand capacity, according to the designation of that area.
Could you qualify that, because the study area actually goes to Devil's Slide, and I think the urban boundary is at the north end of Montera, and so you could,
I'd
you
have to check
can't
that.
widen between Montera and Devil's Slide.
Okay,
I
well,
think you can widen in the urban boundary.
Okay, well, at least the two areas where we were
Right,
proposing.
they are in the urban
They are
boundary.
within the urban boundary and can be expanded.
In the past, this has not been decided, the fact that we're inside the urban boundary. There are still scenic rural areas inside the urban boundary. As a matter of fact, there are open space designations and so forth within that urban boundary. It's not unrural
It
in
was-
some of the areas inside the urban boundary.
It wasn't a quality thing I was saying, it's just that the policy in the LCP that prohibits the widening refers to outside the urban boundary, and that is defined as the north end of Montera.
Because the way this is headed, this certainly will be appealed through the coastal commission.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Josh. I have one more speaker slip from Carol Keller.
And I won't go back over the whole road thing, but I did want to say that I've been here 2 years, and I've always been amazed at the bottleneck of going from 2 to 1 lanes. And I have, thank God, that isn't in Moss Beach, and I'm just shocked to think that we're going to do the same thing in Moss Beach. So I'll leave it at that, because it's definitely a bottleneck. One thing I haven't heard that's a very concern for me, I'm originally from Southern California, and it basically has followed the path of build it and they shall come. And that has always been the way Southern California has worked. When I moved to the Bay Area in '92, one of the things that I admired the most about the Bay Area was the use of public transportation and taking that alternative direction of build it and they will come. Because I had never used public transportation till I moved to the Bay Area and lived in San Francisco. And I took it every day, I took it everywhere. When I went out for the weekend or when I went out for the evening, thank goodness we had public transportation. I haven't heard any proposal for public transportation. And I do know that going from Moss Beach to downtown is a nightmare. I have to walk down to the bus stop and I have to wait. And then when the bus comes, which it's not that frequent, I go to Pacifica. I have to get off the bus there. I have to transfer to another bus system, and then I have to go to BART. I'm not going to do that. That adds probably an extra 40 minutes onto my commute each way. And at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm not going to do that. So why aren't we seeking proposals, for instance, for an express bus from Half Moon Bay to the BART station, which is probably a route that a large percentage of our homeowners in this area take on a day-to-day basis. I can see we got the mega trucks out there, pickup trucks for the contractors and all of those, but I know all my friends commute into San Francisco and they take BART. And to me, there should be an equal balance of population is growing, let's build freeways. No. If the traffic is going to be that bad, we should be seeking really good public transportation alternatives. And it should be express buses. It should be a quick route from point to point. There should be a parking area in Half Moon Bay for those poor souls that have to come up from Santa Cruz to San Francisco or that have to come up from Pescadero so that they can park their car on a day-to-day basis and then take an express bus to BART or even into downtown. I don't know if that can be worked because you've got an overlap, but I do know Alameda County does a great job of transporting into San Francisco, and all my coworkers that live over there, it's an easy commute into the city. And that is the solution to dealing with the high-density traffic, even on the weekend. That's the way that you deal with the drunk driving in the area as we start seeing more and more microbreweries open up, and I love the microbreweries. I wish there would be one down the street from me. But part of the problem, in fact, I was telling Karen, is like, you want to solve the drunk driving issue, just put a microbrewery on every block and we won't have to drive anywhere. But, I mean, really, we need to look on a more long-term sustainable solution to this. And I mean, we're coming up with solutions that you would expect in Southern California in the 1980s, and we need to be more progressive than this. We are part of the Bay Area, and we need to come up with a long-term viable solution for us, which is not the way it's working right now. That's it.
Just to clarify, the proposed hybrid alternative, and I'm sorry if I went through this fast on the slides, but we're trying to finish up, does include increased transit service. That's double the frequency for both the 17 and the 294. It does include park and ride locations within Half Moon Bay and the Midcoast. It does include express buses from the Midcoast, both to BART in San Francisco and to Caltrain in San Mateo.
Okay, because it was that last one, it's this baloney of having to transfer into Pacifica, and what we need to do is we need to come up, and really, that should be the focus. That should be, for the hundreds of millions of dollars you are proposing, and we can't even get a bus system going to SFO or into the city that's decent. We could take that money right now and put in a kick-ass bus system. Can I say that? I mean, really, let's deal with that now and see what the result is. People from the city coming to the Half Moon Bay Festival, why can't they get here except by driving? That would solve the problem now, not 5 years down the line when we're talking about these big plan solutions. So why aren't we working on that solution now instead of trying to find out these big solutions in addition to the public transportation?
Well, I definitely invite any suggestions you have on the website.
All right, is there anybody who wishes to speak who does not give me a speaker slip?
I have 1 minute. 2 seconds.
Just give your name when you start.
Jim Berkey, I'm a Montera resident. I think we should build a freeway over the heck with it. What I'd really like to say is that you guys only have one workshop. That's the 15th of April. I got to do my taxes that night. I can't come. No, I think you should have a couple workshops, because I don't think anybody is one day for as big as what this is. That's all I have.
And I will point out that this is at least the 5th workshop, I believe, 3rd, 4th. I've lost
We're
track.
getting down to
Yeah, and there will be another one in August
Yeah.
or September.
So second on this project, plus the website is an ongoing source for providing input.
Both the presentation.
Yeah, but it's input, and all we have is our say, not slap your hands and say no.
And there will be another in August or early September.
Yeah, I guess I was counting all the earlier meetings on Highway 1 as part of this, because results of that did feed into this. Yeah. All right.
You know, I have a small fraction of a minute for one last comment.
Sure, Leonard, go for it.
Yeah, this is real simple. Redefining the level of service standards for the what's currently E and F to be acceptable is straight out of George Orwell's 1984. Buy his book.
All right. I want to thank you very much, Bill and Josh, for presenting and answering questions and listening. And if you didn't pick anything up, we will have this on the Civic Coast TV, and you can catch it all on YouTube. The link will be on our website.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to get your input and the public's input. We really appreciate it.
All right. We are now moving on to the second item on our regular agenda, which is significantly late. It's the presentation on the Devil's Slide Ride.
Yes.
here where they were sitting is probably the easiest thing to do. And then if we get questions, they can come up to the podium.
The laptop, the slideshow.
Yeah.
Should be okay.
They're gonna need that, yeah, you're doing a
No, we
presentation.
don't have a slideshow.
Oh, you don't have it up there? Okay.
Anybody needs to see.
The handout she's
No,
got is posted.
Aaron was sitting there, but I think you're beat.
Somebody.
The handout she's got is posted on the website with the meeting materials.
That's all right, go ahead.
That's all right.
Go ahead and sit there.
If there's anybody that needs a copy, we bring it to you.
Yeah, if you're watching on camera, the document's posted on our website.
All right, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for coming and for being patient.
Thank you. So my name is Diana Conti. I'm the CEO of PARCA, which is an organization that's been serving people with developmental disabilities in San Mateo County since 1952. 4 years ago, we initiated a new fundraising activity, which is in no small part because of all the reductions in state funding for people with developmental disabilities, and it's called the Devil's Slide Ride. So we are about to have our 4th year. It will be on July 18th this year. We came before you last year to talk about the routes and how that would all work. We think it went very well last year, and we're here to talk to you about what it's going to look like in the coming year. One thing that will be a big difference is that it will no longer go through the tunnel. We have permission to go over the Devil's Slide Trail this year, so there will be no road closures at all. So we would like to do a very brief presentation about what it's going to look like and then ask for your questions and hear your comments. We know that we had, I think, close to 450 riders last year, so it's building up. There may be more this year. It was well organized. There were no events, but we are proud that we're bringing a lot of people into the area to see how beautiful that it is, and hopefully that's helping local businesses. So, all right, want to start? Sure. So basically, Diana covered a lot of what we're saying. So a few of the points that are really important to make is that she did mention that our ride is growing, but we want to let you know that it starts very early. It starts at 6:30 in the morning. So the bulk of our riders are on 2 of our routes, which is the Century route, which is a 100-mile route, and the Metric Century route, which is a 61-mile route. And those routes, those all leave at 6:30. So everybody who's on those rides should be through all the Midcoast communities pretty much by 7:30 in the morning. We do have another ride that starts at 8:30, but that's a much smaller ride. There's maybe about 100, we're thinking about 125, 150 people in that one, and that one does, that leaves at 8:30. And then they do return on Highway 1, and they come back around 11 o'clock. But by that time, they're very dispersed. So you just have like a few groups of 1 or 2 or riders riding along that time. So the impact on the roads and everything to your communities is very, very minimal. And we did this last year as well, and really without incident and no complaints. I don't think people even noticed the people out on the roads. As Diana mentioned, the really big thing was last year we did close the tunnel, even though it was very early in the morning, but I know there was a lot of concern about that. This year, no closures whatsoever. We do have the CHP, because I know that's another issue too. We will have the CHP on hand. They will be accompanying the riders, especially the large group, in the very early morning up Highway 1 to the entrance to the Double Slide Trail, so just for safety purposes. We also have multiple controls in place. We have course marshals that are stationed at Highway 1 anywhere. I know you guys were talking a lot about the crossing of Highway 1 and how that's a big concern. So there's, I think, just 2 crossings of Highway 1, but everywhere there is a crossing of Highway 1, we do have people stationed there to make sure that people are crossing safely, and that there's no, impediment to traffic, and we're not slowing the traffic down. We have SAG and support vehicles that are going around in case there's any injuries. We have ham radio operators in our SAG and support vehicles that are reporting, so that if they do see anybody down or injured or whatever, or, you know, that whose rides are broken down, cycles are broken down, they call and immediately call for help. And we're working with all the local agencies, as we've done in the past. All local law enforcement agencies are all aware that we talk to them. They give us input to see if, if they want us to implement anything. And we also have an emergency response plan, which we coordinate with the Sheriff's Department and all the other agencies in the area.
We also have, this is Sarah Leone, who works with us, and Elias Olson, who is our ride marshal. He's a volunteer. He's also my husband, so he doesn't have much choice about being a volunteer. So he can also ask questions about just the logistics of the ride itself. And to emphasize again, it's a ride, not a race. So everybody doesn't have to go through at the same time. If people are going, they have different paces depending on their ability and their own speed. So.
I will say we had one of our council members ride an 100-mile ride last year. He said
and he had the best time on the Century.
Yes, he did have the best time. And I did not hear any reports from anybody of any issues with the ride, so thank you very much for managing.
Good. So are we showing
I'm going
slides or no?
to just start with Dan. Do you have any questions about the ride that you want to ask?
No. Just wish, I know it's going to be a great success.
Thank you.
I actually do have just a couple of questions, because this is something that we've sort of talked about as a council. So when how many years have you been doing?
This will be our fourth.
Okay, just sort of, if you can give me sort of a brief overview of like what the process, who do you approach to get sort of permission? And then are you paying fees to those people? And if so, like what are those fees that you pay?
The permits?
Yes.
Okay, there's multiple people that we have to get permits from, and I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, so there's, depending, because we have 8 stations that are set up along the route, like for example in Half Moon Bay. So it depends on whose jurisdiction it's under.
Okay.
For example, the city of Half Moon Bay does ask, we do have to apply for a permit with the city of Half Moon Bay, and I believe the permit fee is about $200. Okay. And we have to go to the county, and all those, the 8 stations are in like all the unincorporated areas, or several of them are. So that's not very much. There's I'm going to say $150 or something like that, $200 maybe, to the county for the 8 stations. The city of Pescadero has asked, so there's an 8-station Pescadero. We go through the school district. Pacifica School District also we have some facilities at Pacifica School District, so we go through all these individual entities. This year, Caltrans, because we do have a mountain bike ride component too, which is like contained in Pacifica mostly, but they have a fire road that we access there. So we go to Caltrans. We have to go to McNee Ranch because part of our mountain bike route goes through there. The county, of course, because of the Devil's Slide recreational trail, then we have to apply to the county for that permit. And actually, there's another bit of road up in the with our mountain bike ride. The GGNRA, because up at the top of Montero Mountain, there is a very short part of that that's under their auspices. So we have to apply for a permit up there, and that's about $200. The Caltrans permit is about $500. I'm forgetting some of them, forgive me. The county one is like a per person. I think it's like a few dollars per person to use that we're going to be charged, and we're working with them on that to calculate what that's going to be for the recreational trail. So each entity has like a.
So it seems like, I mean, you're reaching out to a variety of different individuals and organizations or whatever, and then paying a separate fee. Yes. And whatever their parameters are and all that kind of stuff. Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. There's about 20, I counted, I think there's about 20 different entities that we're working with.
Okay.
And for the audience and for you folks, this came up because there have been some events on the coast where people have not gotten any permits.
Mhm.
And
Oh.
we're trying to work out a process to coordinate all of these things.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
it's great to hear that you guys are
Well,
doing
thank
the
you
right
for the
thing.
question.
Yeah, it seems like there might be a possibility to more streamline the.
Yeah.
That would be
20,
wonderful.
I see this
That would
a
be
lot.
Wonderful,
Like-
yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, anything?
No, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us, we appreciate it.
And I don't have anything. Does anybody in the audience wish to ask a question? Fran, come on up.
I just wondered, is there a name to this ride?
It's the Devil's Slide Ride,
Oh, that's it?
and I will leave some of these here for you. These are packets. They're actually sponsor packets, if you know of anybody who would like to sponsor. The website is on here. If any of you are interested in riding or have friends who are interested in riding or who are interested in volunteering, we'd love to have you participate. It has some great pictures that highlights how beautiful it all is. So I'm just going to leave them here in case anybody is interested.
July 18th.
Saturday, July 18th.
Anybody can ride. Just pony up the money, we're happy.
Or volunteer.
Or volunteer. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And we also have, because we serve people with developmental disabilities, the clients come in and we've heard from the riders, one of the best part is they cheer them as they come in at the end. It's really very fun, and I think the riders are really touched. And there's just a really nice interaction between everybody. We really like to see that happening, so.
Great.
Great.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We particularly appreciate your doing your best to make it non-intrusive.
We're trying.
And you know how to get a hold of us if anything.
Yes,
Yeah.
if any of you wants to get in touch and doesn't want to do it through the website, I've got contact information. You can get in touch with me. All right, we are now on to agenda item 4C, PLN 2014-00490, I dropped a 0, letter to county planning on proposed house on 15th Street in Montera. And Patricia Lynn of Montera is going to present on this. We do have a draft letter, which is on the website. There are some copies out there. And I will set the background for this by letting people know that 15th Street is currently a paper street. There is no street, there are no houses on 15th Street. It is basically on the north slope of Montera Creek. So, Patricia, you are up.
I brought my IT backup.
Can't really do it without that.
The microphones are for the TV, so make sure, yeah, there you go.
Well, good evening. My name is Patricia Lynn. I'm a longtime resident of Montera. Professionally, I am a licensed architect. I have been practicing pretty much all my career, been in the building industry, and personally, I'm all for responsible development. I just want to make that clear. I represent the neighborhood group of Montera and Moss Beach, and we currently have a movement. We are here to promote, to save the Montera Creek open space. March 2nd or 3rd of this year, we learned about this proposed development at the end of our cul-de-sac on paper streets of East and 15th on Montera, in Montera. This proposed development is a 2 or 3 story house to be located less than 75 feet from the major Montera Creek. The house is to sit on top of at least a dozen of significant trees that are 75 to 100 years old with diameter of 55 inches or more. And I just wanted to illustrate the point that 55 diameter is really pretty significant. You go to the next slide, please. Here is a picture of where the proposed house is to be sit. Essentially, it's on top of a number of very large trees. Next slide, please. Here is another view of this. So in order to allow for this development to happen, sorry, the...
Trying to figure out a way to turn the lights down so you can see the picture.
Turn the lights on.
Thank you.
There you go.
Now I can't see my paper.
Oh, here, I'll give you my phone.
Oh, thank you.
Give us 2 seconds.
Thanks.
Voila.
Appreciate it.
Did you see the last slide? The previous one?
Yeah, sweetie, can you go back? This is a densely forested area, wetlands, riparian corridor, and there are many, many very, very large trees. Next slide, please. Okay, I just really want to show you, and this corridor extends from the context, Montero Mountain, all the way down. This is the corridor that we're talking about. The proposed development is to sit on the very edge. Go to the next slide. We'll make it bigger. It's really at, okay, go back. It's right there. So there's a very large number of trees, wetlands, and everything else in between. The developer mysteriously went through the San Mateo County planning, and this project was fast-tracked and approved through the design development process in less than 2 months. For some department in 1 day. And only about 5 neighbors received notices for a public hearing for design review scheduled for Thursday, March 12th. The developer somehow got away with only minor comments from the county staff and no reviews by the California Coastal Commission. Next slide, please. And you can look this up online as well. As shown, it was simply rubber stamped. While most development in this area, however minor, would take years. I have been told that the average turnaround to get to this stage of development is about 2 years. Next slide. This is a little bit hard to see, but I just want to illustrate the point that there are at least 12 different departments, from local, county, state to federal, that if you're doing anything near a creek, wetlands, you have to go through. But this development never really went through any of those due processes. We must stop this. We must preserve this wetlands and this riparian corridor. It's consistent with the California Coastal Commission and the related LCP dated 2013. It is also unwise to compound the problem by extending infrastructure, road, sewer, water into open space, sensitive habitat area. We have since raised our concerns with the county, and they have postponed the proposed project from design review until further biological investigations are conducted. The citizens of Montero and Moss Beach have organized, and since then, we have collected 121 signatures in the course of about a week and a half from the 2 towns intending to stop this and any future development along the Montero Creek riparian corridors and wetlands. We have also since engaged the service of an independent licensed biologist and provided his regulatory and biological assessments of the site to the county. We presented a report and a negative impact finding to the management team of the county on March 17th. The report stated that the project potentially creates significant negative impacts, therefore additional environmental review studies that would need to be assessed by the county and all the appropriate agencies. The report goes on and on about the potential, development impact that could be a real negative consequence to the riparian corridor, the habitats, and everything else. And essentially, it went on and stated about at least a couple dozen violations that this project could have imposed on the laws and regulations. And I just want to cite a few. Bay Area Aquatic Resource Inventory, and I want to show you a map that essentially talks about the critical coastal area. Next one. Next slide, please. This is where the creek is, right there. And if you go to the very next slide, and enlarge it a little bit, the extent of the development is right here. So the creek extends not only from the mountain all the way down to the sensitive preserve, but also this at this juncture, it's depends on where you measure it from the property. It's anywhere from 40 to 70 feet. Montero Creek is classified as a perennial creek by the most recent U.S. Geological Survey maps and by other reports for projects along the creek. This classification will require a setback of 50 feet from the edge of the riparian corridor. From our independent biological report, which also calls out the tributary as an intermittent stream, which is consistent with the LCP section 7.8 designation of riparian corridor. We stated that given the existence of the riparian corridors adjacent to the site, a road cannot be accommodated without encroaching upon the corridors and the buffer zone. We also stated that it would appear that due to the existence of the riparian corridors, wetlands, endangered species, and sensitive habitats would preclude development altogether. We are here requesting MCC to raise concerns to the county and to the California Coastal Commission. One, this proposed project and road should not be allowed due to its close proximity to the Montero Creek riparian corridors, wetlands, endangered species, sensitive habitats, and the extensive tree removal not consistent with the county ordinance section 12,000 on significant trees and the LCP chapter 8.9 that prohibits cutting down significant trees. And I just want to say for the record that there are more than the suggested 5 significant trees that are involved with this project. CDP should be required for projects within 100 feet of Montero Creek. This subject parcel is, depending on the source, anywhere from 40 to 75 feet from the creek, and so would need to have a CDP. Biological report should be referred to. The applicable laws and regulations are California Coastal Act, LCP, California Fish and Game Code, the California Water Code, the California Code of Regulations, the Federal Clean Water Act, and the Federal Endangered Species Act. We would like to ensure that all future development will not occur near and at the Montero Creek riparian corridors, not limited to East, 15, and 16 Paper Streets in Montero and Moss Beach. This area should not be CDP exempt as shown on the historical mapping that is over 100 years old, as the creek has changed course significantly over time. The CDP process would require conformance with the applicable policies of LCP and require a biological report and survey for locating the project in respect to the riparian corridor, sensitive habitats, and other coastal resources on or near the parcel. This process will further demonstrate that this proposal and the development along this riparian corridor is not in conformance with the LCP. We would like to propose that the county works with California Coastal Commission and other local, state, and federal agencies to ensure that all development projects follow the same due diligence and review process. None should be fast-tracked similar to this one without appropriate environmental reviews, due process, and community input. We would like to propose that the county works with LCC and local, state, federal agencies to reassess the mapping of this area to preserve this vital regional watershed that connects from Montero Mountain to the Pacific Ocean and Fitzgerald Marine Preserve. Cumulative negative effect of development must be considered. We must work together to preserve this vital watershed as an alternative to allowing development and further compounding the problem by allowing deforestation, extensive grading work, and extending services into sensitive habitat area. There have been many other cases where coordinated preservation has prevailed. Protecting the coastal watershed is vital to a healthy coast and good for all of us. And of course, you know, the economic prosperity for all. We need to do our part. Thank you for allowing us to comment.
Thank you. All right, does anybody on the council have questions about the presentation?
I do. I have a
Go
quickie
ahead.
question. You talked about the permitting process being fast-tracked. Have you been able to ascertain why it is that it was moved along so quickly when you provided examples of other projects taking quite a bit of time?
Yes, we did ask that question very specifically and have not received any answers.
Could I speak to that?
Sure.
The online permit site shows the county process, and they check in with different departments to see if those departments would have conditions to put on the project, such as the fire department might have a lot of ideas on fire protection. And so that's what you saw on that page, where when the fire department writes back on that early referral and they say approved with conditions, that's just their opinion. In other words, what that means is if the project gets approved, then it would include the conditions from the fire department. The fire department has no power to approve this project, nor does Public Works or the various agencies that the referral gets sent to. Normally the referrals are supposed to come to the MCC too, but we've been having a problem getting those. Even though they show that they sent it to us, they didn't really. And the fact that it said there that we didn't comment was because we didn't know anything about the project. But we're gonna comment now. So basically, the project has not been approved. The application has been submitted and it's in process. It has not had any public hearing. And everything is stalled now, waiting for the biologist report. So nothing will be done until they get that, and then that will tell them whether it needs a CDP, or it'll tell them a lot. It'll tell them if they need to get more studies done, or who should be the decision maker. For example, Dennis, the planner, wrote today that said perhaps we'll go to the planning commission. So we just wait on that. And also, when that is released, it might be an opportunity for more comment from the council, or, that would be the next step.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. Certainly the benchmark has been a number of neighbors who have gone through similar processes in the past, ourselves included. For our little project, there were no trees, just weeds involved in building a infill lot on an established street. To get to the design review took 2 years. And we're people who, I think I know what I'm doing, I hope. Our neighbor across the street, they had a little addition of probably about a couple hundred square feet. Took about the same time. And I think we're further away from the creek in question. Another neighbor on 13th Street had very similar story. And we were told by the county very specifically that the average time getting to that point, and rightly so, because we live in a very special area, and these rules and regulations are in place for good reasons. We just want to make sure that the due diligence process is followed.
Yep. And that is why you're here tonight, and why we have written a letter. And Lisa has made major contributions to that letter. In fact, she's done almost all of it. Erin, did you have any more questions on the
No, I'm good.
presentation?
Thank you. I'm good.
Lisa, any other questions?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to the letter. And again, we can have questions about the letter separately from the presentation. And we will have some questions from the audience as well, if you want to make them. All right, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the letter.
So moved.
Does anybody want a second?
I'll second.
All right. Does anybody on the council want to make comments or have questions on the letter?
I do. So my first question is, the letter that was put together by Lisa, has this been reviewed by you and your group? Because I know that you're actively involved.
Yes, and we have just a couple of minor comments, and I really appreciate all the effort and the review that you've done.
So did you want to, I don't know, now's the time to do that? Or?
Let's finish with the council first, and then because Patricia's doing the presentation and brought this to our attention, I'll let her go before the rest of the audience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns about the letter on the council? All right, Patricia, go ahead. Raise your issues that you have with the letter, or corrections, or whatever they are.
There are just a couple more points. I think that this is a very succinct way to raise all the environmental concerns we have. I'd just like to point out to number 5, specifically about the design of the structure itself, that to flip the house from the garage would most likely, in my opinion, require much more extensive grading to make up for the height difference. Okay, so it would disturb, yes, please. It would just disturb the habitat in the corridor even further. The second point is I would like to emphasize the 50-foot setback from the creek and the tributary as part of the LCP requirement. That's the buffer zone. There's many references in the LCP to that effect.
The county's fully aware of what the creek setbacks are. We don't, it's not up to us to tell them. It would almost be an insult, I think. They know. It's their rule.
Well, when I actually spoke with the planner, that didn't really seem to faze them. That, it wasn't important. So I just...
Well, this will come out with the biologist report, because basically what that's going to determine is the extent of the riparian vegetation. Because, at the moment, without any riparian corridor vegetation, your setback is from the creek itself. So if the biologist report shows that you have the indicator plants, then that would expand that. And then the setback would be from the boundary of those sensitive plants. And so that remains to be seen. But, they know that quote I sent you about the setbacks. It's right in the county ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next one is, certainly referring to the significant tree ordinance. San Mateo County Code 12,000 and LCP Chapter 8.9. So we're really looking at not just preserving and protecting one tree, we're looking at doing our very best to protect all trees.
So the ordinance designates significant trees and heritage trees, and it doesn't mean you can't get them removed. You have to get a permit, and that will be part of this permitting process. What specifically did you wish to have added?
Well, in chapter 8.9 of the LCP, it actually states specifically to, I have it right here. It prohibits cutting down trees that have diameters bigger than 55 inches. So in measuring what we're looking at there, that's what we're dealing with.
So it's prohibited, so what are you asking we specifically refer to that in
Yes.
the letter? What's your opinion on that, Lisa?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it's an ordinance that, these are initial comments on the project. If they come out with a staff report or some other document and we see they've got it wrong, then that would be the point to speak up. But I don't think it's the purpose of this letter to recite to them what their ordinance is.
Right, I was thinking that when we get the biological assessment that the county requires, it should mention all trees that are in that category, and that's the appropriate time to comment on that if they leave those out of the addressing that in the plan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we table that for discussion, whether it's now or whenever the most appropriate time frame. That will be fine. And lastly, I understand there may be the discussion or the debate, if you will, about jurisdiction. The environment is really something that we should all care about. It's a concurrent jurisdiction, in my opinion. So this watershed, riparian corridor, really has to do with all the laws and regulations, not limited to just what the county can, should, or should not do.
And that's why these plans go to Fish and Wildlife and California Coastal Commission and
EPA and any other jurisdiction that may
So
be
are
applicable.
Are you saying that some agency that should have been notified was not notified?
That's correct.
Okay, do you have a list of the agencies that you believe should have been notified?
Actually, that was on my slide, that there were 12 different environmental agencies that are applicable. I'd be happy to share that with you. It came straight out of the county's website.
And you're sure that the county did not send it to those agencies?
Yes, I'm sure, because I asked the planner specifically, and he said that because this area is exempt and is not applicable.
Okay, so we can raise that issue again in the letter, but I think it's going to be a little bit of a difficult issue to raise.
I don't see it's crucial at this time, and to try and edit this letter in the meeting and get this out tonight, it's like, I don't think it's worth the, I'm familiar with the county's early referral list, who they send this to, and never seen Fish and Wildlife on there. And, when an environmental document is required, that's when those things go out, and we haven't reached that point. When they get the biologist report, then that will recommend, say, here's the assessment, here's what needs to be done. We might say it needs to go to this agency or that agency, but we're not there yet.
Well, I respectfully, certainly understand that, but at the same time, it wasn't until we actually raised the issue with the California Coastal Commission that they became aware of that project.
Right, because it is in the categorical exclusion area. And this we point out in our letter, we're saying we are questioning that, and that given the proximity to the sensitive habitat, that it may very well prove to be within their appeal area, and therefore would require CDP. That is covered in there. It's worded in a way that that's what the county and the Coastal Commission, that's the wording that they use. And as far as a global changing of the categorical exclusion area, sort of taking that out, the Coastal Commission would have to initiate that. That's outside the county's power.
outside of the county's
So
power.
we've copied the Coastal Commission staff,
Mhm.
and so they'll be aware of what's going on.
So there'll be coordination with
Right,
the,
but
with their
what
review.
Lisa
They
is
they
saying-
will step in if they feel that
Okay.
needs to happen,
Right.
because the ball would be in their court on that issue.
But the county does not have the ability to change that. They could request that the coastal commission look at it, but the county cannot itself do it.
But even if the categorical exclusion area is changed, which that's a different project, that doesn't mean that this may end up being appealable to the Coastal Commission and require a CUP. That's that's the direct route to getting accomplished what you want to have with this particular project.
Okay.
The bigger picture, long-term, would maybe lend to that other thing.
Okay.
And, and that was the tie-in with the meeting tonight with Connect the Coast Side, where they're talking about land use, that we've somehow got to adjust our build-out numbers, and the first, he talks about lot retirement, and that's exactly it in the last paragraph of the letter. The county should prioritize the undeveloped antiquated subdivision lots on 15th Street for retirement. And maybe they need a mitigation fund in order to have that, but anyway, it's timely with that
Certainly.
project. It's like, why open a new area for development in a sensitive place, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So I just want to point out, as it stands now, before I open this to public comment, the draft letter stands, except we've removed the one paragraph,
Number 5 is gone.
requesting rotation of the house. All right. Adrian, did you wish to speak to this?
Yes.
You're up first. You have the first question.
Thank you, the council, for letting me speak. My name's Adrian Mallinger. I live on 14th Street and Highway 1 since 2000, 15 years. I had 3 points organizing here. One, I was the one that got the majority of the signatures, about 121 of them, and it really only took a weekend and a couple of days after that. It's a significant number, as there's not that many people there, and it wasn't just those on 14th or 16th Street. It extended the whole circle of the map around there, Fairlawn, 13th, 12th, down on Lincoln, Cypress Street, but also people that in the back, in Cedar and 5th Street. So it's not just, not in my backyard situation. It's the whole community. Not those just live there, but those that drive by coming home and look into that corridor with that green. You come up from Highway 1, like, whew, I'm home, all that green. Everybody enjoys that, not just those of us that live on that corridor. And the only people that didn't sign were people at conflict, real estate agents, people who were on water boards, and one person who was a friend of the builder's wife, so I understood that. But even all of those people gave advice and were supportive. They just couldn't put their name on the signature page. Also, keep in mind that across from the corridor there is the lighthouse. So it's not just the residents, but it's the people that come to the coast to visit from all around. I see them every day walking by the lighthouse there, taking their photos, going out to go hike or go explore. As they come out of that lighthouse there, they look across Highway 1, and again, that's that whole corridor that's enjoyed by other people, not just us neighbors. The big thing that caught my eye in researching this, and Patricia, some tremendous amount of research, that the creek has moved, and it's going to continue to move in different patterns. So what may have looked appropriate on a map 100 years ago, it's different now, and it's going to change 100 years from now, and other people are going to live in my house. So I really want to keep that in mind, the potential for the creek to move. And the other large issue that came up when I was talking to other neighbors and things I've heard, it's not going to be just this house. I'm not saying there's this lot. There are other lots on 15th Street that potentially could be built out. There are lots on 16th Street I've heard that have been recently purchased by a woman in Southern California who's looking to build, now this is just me talking with neighbors, 3 to 8 houses on 16th Street. And I've also heard, again, talking to the neighbors and getting these 121 signatures, that it's also in the back of Carlos Street in Moss Beach, where the old World War II barracks were, and apparently a school. There's talk of building that out into low-income housing, just what I'm hearing on the street, literally talking to people. So I want you to keep in mind, it's not going to be just this house, it's potentially others. And if you say, well, it's just one house, okay, it's just another house here, oh, it's just this, and you look at it in totality, what it actually could be, nobody would have approved all of this area being built out, but its potential. And this is an opportunity to protect this corridor. One note. Oh, and I appreciate point 6, Lisa, if you wrote that in the, I think that talks to what I'm talking about. These paper streets need to be protected. That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I do want to point out that the World War II barracks and office buildings, also where Spotty Park was, for those who are familiar with that issue, is in fact zoned as low-income housing, and Montero Water and Sanitary District has both water and sewage capacity reserved for that project, should it ever happen. So, and there has been some renewed interest in that property. So you're correct about that.
My concern is, if you look at the bigger picture, it was all allowed piece by piece. I know earlier in the discussion, the first topic on tonight about widening the highway between 9th and Etheldor there. Well, one, I don't think it, well, I live right on the edge, I don't think it's possible, but, sorry, I was trying to thought. But I don't think, it's not possible, I don't think physically to extend that road. I live on it, where the creek, where the drainage thing is. So even if all these homes were built, I don't think you would even have the capacity on the highway for them to get in and out. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonard, you're up next, and Jim, you're after Leonard.
I really had not planned on speaking on this item at all. But boy, there are a lot of squirrely issues here. Somewhere in the upland center of El Granado, there's the Montecito riparian corridor. One of the parcels next to that is one of 3 parcels in the whole county that the county has declared non-buildable, and yet we could not get the county to stop a new property owner who bought it knowing it was undevelopable. We could not get the county to stop him from going in on weekends with a chainsaw and cutting down the riparian vegetation. So you need to keep your eyes peeled on this, and especially watch out for 3-day weekends, because what developers do is they go in late Friday afternoon on a 3-day weekend and cut everything down so that they can then check the box saying no trees to be removed, because they illegally cut them all down in advance. So you really need to stay on top of this. My understanding on the setbacks is that seasonal streams require 50 feet and perennials 100 feet, so you need to do some serious research on that.
It's 30 and 50. 30 for intermittent,
Sure
50 for,
about that?
yes.
Okay, that's not my understanding. I could also be mixed up with the Half Moon Bay LCV. And it's also my very solid understanding that when there's ESHA involved, environmentally sensitive habitat area, that the exclusion zone does not apply, and it's automatically CDP required when there's any even question of is there ESHA, the CDP is required to evaluate whether there's ESHA there or not. So if the county's saying it's in the exclusion zone, my personal opinion is they're lying to you. The county routinely says things aren't appealable to the Coastal Commission, and most of the time that's a lie. Sometimes it's true, but most of the time it's not. Tree ordinances, boy, that's been a sore point for about as long as I've lived here. The county has tree ordinances. They're window dressing. All it is a way for the county to collect a couple $1,000 for the permit, because there's no provision in the ordinance for the county to deny the permit to cut down a tree. You can cut down any tree you want, you just have to pay a couple $1,000 for the permit. So Midcoast Council really needs to revive that issue and get those ordinances fixed. And now, I don't know about Montero, but in El Granado, the 100-year-old maps from 1906, the subdivision maps, did not factor in where the streams are. Somebody just took a thing that represented the area of El Granada and drew streets on it. And in fact, the guy who did that never came to El Granada. He sent one of his henchmen on a horse to ride around, but they didn't factor in where the streams are. And maybe the same thing happened in Montera. I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm going to conclude with a comment from somebody who's long gone, but Laura knows who said this. The bologna is sold, regarding it's only one house, the bologna is sold one slice at a time.
All right, thank you, Leonard. Jim, you're up.
Thanks. Hey, I'm Jim Berkey. We live on, Susan, my wife, and I live on 16th Street. So we're on the bottom side of this. So one of the things I'd like to add to the letter is, along with naming the 5 trees, or that there's trees being taken, what doesn't get addressed in this is that there's a pathway or a road having to be extended from 14. You do mention the one 14 tree right on the corner, but as the road comes down, there are a number of trees that need to be taken out. So it's not just the 5 that are in the property. The other thing is, it does say they only want an East Street exit, or parking. They do not want to go into 15th Street on this property. It's the thing of the camel's nose is under the tent, just keep going. 15th Street has numerous trees, as the pictures show, so as you go along. So I don't know if we can say something that there's more trees than just what's on the property specifically that are being affected. And the concern I have with trees is that these are cypress. The way cypress works is you have your canopy. The roots go twice as far from the canopy. So that's holding a lot of soil and drainage. And you go and take this house, and then you take all these trees out, then you start taking all that water, and it's just rushing down to the creek. So there's a couple things that I don't know if we can add that little tidbit of just more trees.
How about if we change removal of 5 significant Monterey cypress trees to removal of many significant cypress trees? How about that?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. That's on one.
And if I may interject here, I think we probably should address the runoff issue of the driveway, even if the driveway is made of permeable materials. We all know that even permeable materials increase runoff. Is that something that we should address?
DPW has sent their conditions, and our their drainage requirements are extensive now, beefed up. They were put in all the zoning ordinances and the new LCP update, and all that boilerplate will be on the final permit. I don't think we have anything to add to that.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to ask, because I'm a little, it sounds like you guys didn't get this information on the first pass, so could you just go through the steps as to how you get affected?
We're supposed to get,
by this?
when somebody submits a permit application,
Yeah.
and the planner sends out an early referral with plans to the different departments, like fire, DPW,
Correct.
coastal commission if it's required, and MCC. They're supposed
You
to send
should
it
get
to
them.
us.
Okay.
And so we could review it, and then if we have comments, we can submit them at that time. And at that point, they're just initial comments to the planner in a
Okay.
kind of informal way.
Okay.
And anywhere along the line, we could send comments. So like at this point, when we're saying, of course, they never did send us that referral. We found out about it when you did, when it was on that
Okay.
March CRC agenda. And at that point, I said, well, hey, can we see the plans? And so, and then we were in communication with you all and working
Right.
on this. And I forget where I was going with this.
What-
You want to know our
what's the next
process?
step
Okay,
then
so
after
normally
the-
then, it'll go through, depending on what the project is, how complicated it is, it'll
Okay.
have different requirements. And in this case, since it's east of the highway, if there were no environmental issues and they were not asking for any variances or anything like that, then it would not require a CDP, a coastal development
Correct.
permit. It would require design review,
Got it.
but then it would be a staff level approval. But in this case, they've, given the location, they've said, the applicant needs to submit this, they have to pay for it, this biological report. And that's the first step to assess what other requirements this project might need. I mean, at that point, they could say, well, it needs a negative, well, I don't know if you know the terms. It's short of an EIR, but it's a mitigated negative.
Okay.
I mean, basically,
Impact.
at that point, when they get that report, then they'll know, well, okay, we need to expand this, or this needs to go to a higher level of decision, or what. We're waiting on that. And
Okay.
so, basically, the planner knows, I've communicated with him that we're interested in this. As soon as he gets that report, he'll send that to us. So like I say, once again, we might comment again. As you notice, it says, these are our initial comments.
Okay. The next question I have for you, so it's back in Dennis's court, waiting for a biological?
Well, pretty much it's in the
Kinda.
applicant's court to
It's the
produce that
applicant
report.
to
Yes,
produce that
yes.
to Dennis,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Dennis then processes that. Do you get to see that report?
Yes, we asked him, we want to see it as soon as he gets it.
Does the public get to see it?
You can ask Dennis to send it when he gets it.
Yes, and ideally, although this has not happened a lot of the time, if you go to the plan permit site, something like that should be available for download on the plan permit site.
Yeah.
It almost never is.
No.
Got it?
No,
Okay.
those kind of documents aren't there. You have to ask the planner. Like a
Planner.
big wave, when they get anything in, I have to ask Camille to send that.
Right. And then, assuming that all the paperwork's done, planner approves everything and says the project's approved, it can still be appealed to the planning commission at that point.
Do you then, does it then come back to you guys for review again?
When we review it, it's sort of a complimentary thing. We can't weigh in on this project. We can't approve or disapprove this project. All we can do is comment
Got
and
it.
ask them. We can reinforce what your concerns are.
Got it.
And try and help with the process.
Okay,
And it doesn't mean they're gonna listen to us.
understood. Okay. Can you guys help address, there's conflict I'm hearing of water and sewer.
That's up to the Water and Sewer Department. If they
Understood.
say,
Is there water and sewage capability?
I assume there is, Montero Water and Sanitary has replied that they can supply the project.
Got it. Okay. I think that's it.
And if you had any further questions on that, you could talk to the manager at
At-
MCC.
at-
Yeah, Clemens
at
would be the one to talk to.
Montero,
Right.
yeah, okay. Yeah, just- It kind of helps me understand
Yeah.
what's happening. Now, with your last statement here, which is saying you're in agreement that this should go to green.
Go to what?
Green, be green and only green, no more development? Is that
Oh.
how you're,
For the rest of
The
the
last
15th Street
paragraph?
properties, yeah.
what do you get, what in your statement there, what's the?
I don't understand your question.
I'm
don't
taking it that you do not like this development, therefore you don't want to see any development in this area. Is that correct?
You can't deny a property owner any development on
Oh,
their
that's the
property.
other
That's
one I
a
wanted.
takings,
Yeah.
that is a takings. I mean, you could say you want to stop this project, but you
Well,
can't
I
really.
understand that.
You can't.
Yeah,
The
I
county
understand
would be
that.
sued.
Everybody has, I
Yeah.
do want to say that the person that's trying to build on this is a developer
Right.
and not a personal owner of property.
I understand that, right. And there was.
He's out there to make money, which
Yes.
is, hey,
Mhm.
all for it. But when it's starting to tear up what's going around,
Well, this is why it's important to watch the process closely, and there was some comment, concern that our letter included requests that assumed that the project would be built, such as the landscaping and the address. And the reason those things are in here is because you need to keep in mind, the project may get built. And if it does, you would like it to be the best you could get it.
Understood.
So to think of both, you know.
Well,
Not saying you give up on the one, but just to warn you, I don't think the county's gonna say he can build nothing there.
Well, the whole thing here, Lisa, and certainly we're not really looking at taking, we're raising some very valid issues that really is in direct conflict with a lot of rules and regulations. And we're going down that legal route, which is, I think, the most appropriate. And we just want to make sure, as elected officials, MCC is, that we look at that the project, the processes are in total conformance with all the rules and regulations, which so far, everything that we've seen in the process, the county and the developer, and I don't know if the relationship and the fact that this company has had many, many dealings with the Bureau has anything to do with the fast-track nature of this process. I think it wouldn't hurt to state the obvious.
I want to stop you there because we're sort of past that point, but I do want to point out that, for better or worse, people who've been through the process many times know the things to avoid in their project and the things to provide. And Paul has been through these many times, and so he's avoided a lot of those, and that's why he gets through the first few steps of the process faster than somebody who has not. It does not mean the project is approved, as Lisa's pointed out, and they are following the process. So we're trying to keep them on the straight and narrow, but
Okay.
remember that it is not an approved project yet. Okay, Bill Kehoe, you are waiting for a chance to speak.
Actually, it's not on this, but what you said about the lot in North Morse Beach and low-income housing. You made a referral that it's kind of been talked about. I want to request that the council gather information on that, as well as the lot down by Seton, which was also designated for low-income housing, and sort of give a report back. I've also heard similar rumors, and also about possible development in Caltrans bypass lands, and it's kind of interconnected. So my questions are, what's the game, who's playing it, and when do we get to know about it?
Yeah, and I can say we're all very much aware of those issues. We're tracking it. As many of you heard at Big Wave, people suggested that Big Wave would be relocated to one of those because it was zoned for that kind of use. So, we have contacts with realtors just like the developers do. We hear of interest in that. We have people who are neighbors of those properties who are in touch with us. So we absolutely will keep our eyes on those. Lisa?
On that Caltrans bypass land in Montera, I had heard from Marlene Finley that they got a grant, well, they got funding to do a master plan for the area, which is required. The Coastal Commission requires that to be done before anything happens with that land. And so this will be coming up this year. And we can ask her, she'll be out at the Parks Forum, and you could ask her more about it there.
And will that come back to the community for comment?
Absolutely.
Well, that whole process will be public.
I'm a little nervous.
Oh, I said to her, this was in a meeting at Midcoast Parklands. I said to her when she talked about that, I said, there's a intense community interest in this. Dave Holland was there, and he said, that's an understatement. So, yeah, they're well aware that there's high interest in that.
Yeah. And as some of you know, I'm on the Committee for Green Foothills Board, and Committee for Green Foothills is following that very closely as well. So I will definitely hear about that. All right, is there anybody else who wishes to make a public comment on this? Okay, so we have a motion made and seconded. I want to see if somebody wants to make an amendment to the motion for the two changes that I believe we have. We're changing 5 trees to many and
Can
dropping
I
paragraph 5.
Make that motion?
You may.
All right, so I move we approve the amended letter, which deletes item 5 and changes item 2 to change 5 significant Monterey cypress trees to many significant cypress
And
trees.
Laura, you seconded the previous motion?
I will second this motion.
All right. I don't think we need any further discussion on the amendments. I call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
All right, abstaining 1 and none against. Motion carries. We'll send the amended letter. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patricia, for
Thank you
bringing this
very
to our
much.
attention. Adrian, appreciate it.
Yeah, may I just comment that it's heartwarming. It's really nice to see people from the community taking the time to come out here, taking the time to bring this to everyone's attention. So many thanks for that.
I feel it was great. I got tea with people, and somebody gave lasagna for dinner. So it's really nice just in the community, no faces.
All right. Thank you very much for all your patience. I know we're running very late. We're on to our last item on the regular agenda, item 4D. Letter to the county on two-stage safe crossings. Dan Haggerty will do the presentation. We do have a draft letter on this, which we will discuss after the presentation.
Okay, so this, well, this letter is about empowering our community to, with picking the best design option for pedestrian crossings across our highway. Everybody wants to be able to cross it safely. It's a very big deal as to which design option that we choose. There are many there are different design options out there, and I'm concerned that we just have to get it right. We have to get it right for our community, because it not only is crossing the road safely, but it's affecting the vibrancy of the whole community, the business community, just keeping traffic congestion down low. I feel that the burden should not be on us to do our complete homework and to find out what's out there, what could be best. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about, well, let's see, I'll just go right here to, there's a example of a two-stage crossing. The idea is that you get out to the middle, you're only stopping traffic in one direction. You're safely at the middle, you turn and you walk towards oncoming traffic, creating eye contact with the driver, and then you wait there until you can continue and complete the crossing. Here's kind of a basic diagram. There are lights, signal lights described here, but they are not necessary. Our road is a 2-lane road, so one could easily make that cross to the refuge island in, well, depending on someone's ability, but I'm not saying that lights are a bad idea. I'm saying that they may not be necessary in some locations. In fact, there's a lot of discussion about having a false sense of security. The lights, the beacons that are proposed for our Highway 1, they have an example at Westlake Shopping Center in Daly City. And I was there just for 10 minutes, kind of observing the action, and I noticed a pedestrian in a car. You know, the lights were flashing, but both of them weren't sure what was happening. So there's no assurity that the lights are the safest. In fact, they may add to the problem by giving, in some cases, a false sense of security. So, you know, people are hurt at signaled crossings every day. So I'd like to consider this as, consider it, I just thought of this the other night, consider it as crossing, a pedestrian crossing with training wheels. It really helps your average person probably doesn't like to cross the road unless they feel 100% safe, and there are certain body motions that they can do, walking directly toward the oncoming traffic, having eye contact specifically, which makes it a heck of a lot safer. So I am, and other people in the community are upset that it hasn't been discussed. It's not, I'll take that back up a little bit. It hasn't been discussed enough as to why and why not. I understand, I expect that there will be some statements saying that Caltrans will not allow just something like this simple, for some reason. I do know that there are exceptions that Caltrans has made, and I think that with a little bit of work, a little bit of discussion, a little bit of creativity, we can get something like this. Again, we got to get this right, because this is going to fold into a model all the way down the coast. Most likely will happen, and having these working could be a key element of the network of trails, which, if we can get that to a level where people are comfortable using it, then that is going to result in less cars on the road, and less congestion, more. So they're not necessary to be set back from intersections, but it works better if it does. You've probably heard the mid-block concept. If it was just offset a little bit away from a typical intersection, you're going to eliminate all the other dangers involved with turning cars. Let me go through a few other pictures. This is in Florida. This is in Las Vegas, near UNLV. In fact, they just put, in fact, I should say, there's other names for these crossings. Las Vegas calls it a Danish offset, but it's basically the same concept. An angled crossing you'll see here. This one's in Michigan. This one's in Sacramento. This is an angled crossing. It does the same thing with a different flavor. Here's some with landscaping, which I think has a lot of merit. This one is been in use for a number of years. This one's in North Carolina, very small. And that's it. I think that some more time and some more exploring of this option should be given. So I would like to make a motion. Can I make a motion as the author?
Let's find out if anybody has questions on the presentation first, and then move on to the motion. And since it's your letter, I prefer that somebody else make the motion, but that's certainly you're allowed to. Does anybody have questions about the presentation? Sounds like the answer is no. Somebody want to make a motion about the letter then?
I would like to make a motion that we approve the letter as written.
I do have actually one quick question, sorry.
Okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, when the gents were here earlier talking about the Connect the Coastline, or coast side, I was wondering if, because in paragraph number 1, 2, 3, you had said this option is not presented in the survey, and there's no provision for a none of the above other than by writing comments, and that was confusing to many people. I was just wondering if that wasn't what you were referring to earlier, Lisa, about
The survey has been fixed. You can indeed
okay.
comment and have no vote and
Right.
whatever.
So then,
That's
is that statement then no longer true?
correct?
Okay. So within the body of the email, I don't think that that statement is any longer valid if they fixed that option. Did you
Well,
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying, but your average person on the coast side doesn't even know that this is an option. So I think it's a disservice to not have this discussed and not educate the community that this could be a viable, a very good option. So I think that.
And I understand that. So I was just saying, like, so for instance, for that sentence, if you said this option is not presented in the survey, that would be a valid statement. But to say there is no provision to vote for none of the above other than by writing comments, and that was confusing to many people. Am I correct in that assumption?
That was fixed after Dan wrote the draft. Yes.
Okay.
Are you open to amending the letter on that area, Dan?
Well, we could strike none of the above and replace it with this option.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. We still don't have a second. Does somebody wish to second the motion?
Well, I'm gonna.
Can I say something?
No, not until after we've got our discussion. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. We have willingness to do some amendments. Does anybody want to make comments on the letter specifically?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
I don't understand why a proposed MCC letter on crossing alternatives was not requested under future agendas previously. This letter appeared at the last possible minute this past Sunday. This is a topic we are all very interested in and have spent considerable time on. Yet the draft letter includes only one council member's issue and assumptions. I too have specific comments on the alternatives, including some new ideas, which I submitted as an individual, which as I thought was the plan. We have not yet seen an accounting of the preferences and individual comments submitted by community and council members. If we decide it would be useful to comment as a council, I think we should first review the survey results and comments submitted, and then consider the full set of issues. I'm not sure that it would be productive or useful, but I do not support this letter as drafted or any amended version that we could hope to achieve here tonight in the time remaining. That's it.
All right.
Can I respond?
Hold on, let's see if we have other comments first. Laura, do you have any comments you want to make?
Yeah, I guess I'm feeling like, first of all, I fully understand your concerns. I just feel like this is too late, because it's my recollection that during agenda setting, we had said that we were going to, maybe I'm imagining things, but I thought that we had decided that we were not going to comment as a council, that because it would be just as effective for us to turn in our individual comments on the mind mixer, that's it. And so, yeah, and I don't feel good about saying, oh, well, just Dan's comments are gonna be important and we'll turn those into the county, but what the rest of us think is just being put on the website as opposed to being supported by the full council. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand.
So I guess that's where I am with this.
Okay. Aaron, any comments?
No, I'm just glad it's open for discussion.
Okay, so Dan, go ahead and respond.
So, this is the first time we as a council got together and after the presentation at the Cypress Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very appropriate timing. And the deadlines for the comments are up and coming fast. This is our last chance to make a comment. You know, I in no way, you know, feel that this idea, because it's something that I feel strongly of, is more important than anybody else's idea. No, not at all. I have a lot of people in the community that I've told, has mentioned that we as a council should be weighing in on this. They elected us, and we should be taking a voice. And yeah, this is our last, you know, and if anybody on the council truly feels that this is not important enough to move forward, then vote that way. But you have to be clear in your heart that getting the crossings right for our highway is extremely important. It has major impacts on congestion and safety. We want to have the option that keeps our traffic flowing, but at this and is the lowest possible environmental impact, but still provides that safety that we want everybody to have.
Okay, thank you. I do want to point out, before I open it to public comment, that this is not the last opportunity to comment on it. Whatever comes out of the study and becomes a preferred alternative will turn into a design, at which point there will be design reviews before anything is built. So there will be more chances, and I certainly understand what you're saying. I just want to point out that there will be more chances.
The options will be much more limited, though, after this.
Okay, so
Can I qualify what I said, because I get the sense that I didn't express myself clearly enough. I didn't mean that your issue is not important in the least. I just question the elevation of only this issue to the level of council approval, and without any time for the other council members to craft a comprehensive letter of issues that we all could weigh in on. And in that sense, if you had felt strongly that the council needed to comment, if you could have asked 2 weeks ago to put this on the agenda and worked with one or two council members on this, we might have something that was more representative of the council as a whole.
I'd be very happy to table this, and we could schedule a special meeting to where everybody could weigh in, and we could have that done before April 15th.
Well, I would say if it goes in that direction, that we might consider the timing of this, and as I said, it might be more useful to do this once we've seen the compilation of the survey and those comments, and then we would have a better sense, not just, well, I think the majority of people think such and such. We would actually have those results, and that would help inform a discussion. And just to point out that there is a 3-week gap between the Parks Forum and our next meeting.
Respectfully, Lisa, how can the community members know,
okay, so
That's
Dan,
not how you-
intelligently pick?
Hold on a second. I don't want to get into a debate about who knows what about the community. The reason I agreed to put this on the agenda is you clearly had some community interest. Lisa's right, perhaps, that we should have had a more general letter if we were going to do a letter, but we are where we are. The motion's been made and seconded. You can withdraw the motion if you want, or we can go ahead and have the public comment and vote. Which would you prefer?
Let's have public comment and see what comes of it.
All right. So I have 2 speaker slips on this, one from Bill Kehoe and one from Leonard Warren. So Bill, you are up first.
Well, I want you to know, this is a record. I've had to make a comment at every single agenda item. I feel like I'm back on the council. Joel,
We have a
hardly
seat.
Joel, we hardly miss you. Okay, I got pulled into this thread, and it made me think a little bit. I appreciate what Dan's trying to do here. And I agree, not on this particular solution, sorry, it wouldn't have been my first or even third choice. But I think, and I'm gonna sort of back up here, the process that went on at Cypress Garden, there was roughly 30 some odd people there. If you look at most of the returns on the vote, there were 20. The reason for that was you had alternate A, alternate B, and even though they said, well, you can kind of mix them and match them on their website, people were confused, some people didn't vote at all. I was really shocked by the results. I think a few other people, even some council members, were amazed that they kind of went with all the lights and not the safe refuge type of crossing. And I thought of other things later on. I think from maybe talking with Dan about it might make more sense to put the safe refuge in the middle of the block, not at an intersection, less degrees of freedom, less things to check out, easier to cross and all that. So when I said to connect the coast side, I think, you know, the council needs to take another bite of this apple. And if what you say, Dave, that, you know, there'll be opportunities later on. I think there's a couple of things. I wish some of the people from Moss Beach that were here before didn't all leave, but, you know, this is very late. These meetings never ran this way when Laura was on the council.
Because I didn't let anybody talk.
So these are either, Dave, you really have to get your act together. But I think it was confusing. People didn't know how to vote. I don't think it was led well from the standpoint of fully fleshing out the options and having it more of a public discussion. So we kind of all got this stuff crammed in, and it was just too many items to even hope to get through in one meeting, especially if you haven't done your homework ahead of time, especially if you haven't read it. And let's be honest, 30 people in Moss Beach, you know, we have how many? 6,000 or something? I don't know, I've lost the number, 5,000? You know, that's not a whole lot. So the council, I know you guys don't get paid for this, you put a ton of time in, but sometimes complicated issues like this have to be on the agenda 2 or 3 times, because not everybody can make it. Some people have to go home and digest it. Maybe they're watching on TV. So I don't want to undercut Dan. I like where you're going with this, but I think you guys should try and schedule another one. I'd like to hear all your opinions, because I think we could all make a lot of different changes on there, and that, you know, and I hope everybody at home goes out and somebody give the website again to actually go out and do the survey and put in those comments. Maybe we'll see some good reflections back, and maybe not, but we should come back and visit it after that happens. And I would like to see the whole council work together on it with a fully comprehensive letter that I'm kind of used to from this council coming out. I think that would be a much better product, so, anyway.
Bill, just a question, I got a little confused. So when are you suggesting, in what stage of the process are you suggesting?
I think at this point, because it's next week.
Oh, you mean, so before they?
No, I think the council will have to come back after.
Yeah,
You
okay.
know, I mean.
After we see the compilation.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think at that point, if the comments still seem out of whack, which what a lot of us feel would have been the responses we were expecting, then maybe we'll have to fight back harder to get those things in there. But, you know, I don't think that process really communicated to people. Left-hand turn lane, I mean, can I just take one simple thing? This is already way too late. But I never saw like examples of, well, if the crossing is here, and let's take Virginia and California, you know, a street I know well, 30 years I've been crossing there. You know, if you put the crossing at California, you got 5 streets, you got to look all over the place. You know, a safe crossing there with the refuge, complicated with people going left. You know, you got too many things going on. Virginia, also problematic. But then you got these left-hand turn lanes all along Moss Beach. If you put a refuge in there, they have to be shortened down. And I never saw a combination. You know, maybe a couple of streets need to be crossed off. And I don't want to mention any, because whoever lives on those streets will be coming after me with the pitchforks and that. But, you know, I mean, there was never really an integrated solution And that, you know, if you're gonna do one from column A, one from column B and vote, it's much easier if you have a nice integrated solution, simplified, clear. The way it was, it's, you know, it was like trying to put your kid's Christmas present together without instructions. I mean, that's what it was, so.
And I believe you're right, a lot of people's comments reflected that. I know I myself made comments on my mixer to that effect. I'm sure others did as well, so.
And you can change it.
So make sure you have a copy first.
Yeah, that's right.
But I'm more informed now. So go ahead, you have the floor.
Can you remind everybody how to get to that survey?
The link is on the Midcoast Community Council website, I believe.
smcspeakout.org, I believe.
No, that's the other one. This is the Mind Mixer is the one.
Well, yeah, that's it, SMC, whatever. Best to go to the council website,
Okay.
midcoastcommunitycouncil.org. You can't go there too many times.
There's lots of great stuff.
Good stuff, good stuff, everything you need to know.
Okay, sorry.
If you can only put the weather on that page.
What do you want?
The weather, we need the weather.
Yeah, you can put a weather widget on there, which will slow down the page.
Debbie Down?
Okay, I know it's late, folks, but it's not the comedy show.
I support sending the letter basically as is, and the reason this is necessary is because of the false dichotomy that they presented, which the county has specialized in for at least as long as I've lived here, is presenting false dichotomies, where they want to do something, and they want everybody to say, yeah, that's what we want you to do, so they present something else that is so ridiculous that nobody will say, we want that. So yeah, everybody says we want the one that the county wants to do, because the other choice is so atrocious. This time it backfired, you know, the county thought that people would vote for the long continuous center medians, but it didn't work. People said, nope, you have to widen the highway all the way along, so they didn't vote for that. But as far as, well, we can wait until they do the final design and present it and comment on it, that never works. Okay, once the final design is presented, it's essentially cast in concrete, even though you may see lips flapping saying otherwise. And I'll give you a really, really good example of that. The one-lane freeway through Murata Surf West that they call a trail, okay, I'm sorry, it's a one-lane freeway. It's wider than a traffic lane for vehicles. When the plan for that was presented by a guy who used to work for Callender, and by the way, anytime you see a government agency hiring Callender, you know that they're interested in some overly expensive, overbloated project. So the guy who did that used to work for Callender, he had the same baggage. And when I said, it's too big, it's overblown, we don't need that, he said, well, or maybe the county guy who was standing next to him said, well, we've already spent all the design money, we can't change it. That's the way these things work. That's where we're headed. Once the final design comes out, you're not going to change it. And the key reason why this letter needs to be sent is because the vast majority of the people at the Farallon View school meeting preferred the stubby, localized raised medians, not the continuous thing that was presented at Cypress Meadows. And there was no provision for that whatsoever in their impossible to read spreadsheet that's on the website. And that option, which is what this letter is pushing, has not been presented anywhere. And yet that's what the majority of the people who were at that meeting wanted. So that's why you need to send this letter. Because the county needs to pay attention and do what the people want instead of just saying that they're paying attention and just saying that they're doing what the people want. So I really urge you to send this letter or something very close to this. Thank you.
Fran, and then Jim.
This maybe was the item I should have spoken on, because I do support that. And in fact, several of us said that, you know, that we want the the islands, the of short little, those were some examples. I'm not sure we, want to go with that particular design, but short and easy for crossings. Can we incorporate this in the April 15th, workshop? Because it's part of this whole thing of, it's a solution to safe crossings rather than signals or the roundabouts. I don't know. Does everybody feel like, I kind of thought we wanted the highway all similar all the way down. But are we going to have roundabouts and islands and signals someplace else? And it's going to be just a big mishmash of all kinds of things? Is that the way do people want that, or do you want some consistency with the look of Highway 1?
Well, that may mention that there is something to be said for consistency.
Yeah,
If I may, just clarify one thing, that some of those pictures were longer than I would prefer.
Yeah.
They can be, it
I
was
know.
just for
I know.
conceptual.
I'm just saying,
They
that
can be
was a
small.
concept. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be that big, and it can be the smaller ones, and that serve the purpose. And I had also said that if there has to be signals, they should be like the ones on the.
Okay, so Fran, we're not talking about the Connect the Coastline here. We can do that next week.
No, this is the islands.
Yeah, okay.
Well, because they
Then
wanted.
don't talk about signals, so.
No, well, they're putting signals on the
Dan's
island.
letter doesn't have anything to do with signals. So you're certainly free to bring that up next week. But
Which I think she
Okay.
means beacons.
Let's hold it to
That's what
Dan's
she-
letter.
Oh, you mean the flashing,
Yeah, we don't want
That's a
those
signal
big
for the pedestrian to go.
overhanging flashing lights.
Nobody has proposed overhanging flashing
Well,
lights
that's
except
what-
at Devil's Slot.
Huh?
That was
No.
the only location in the safe crossings that had the overhang
Those
signals.
alternatives last, whenever it was.
Yeah,
At
the
Cypress,
alternative.
it looked like they were
Yeah,
on both
There
alternatives.
was one alternative that proposed that, but everybody voted against it.
All right, well, they still said on the islands, you have to have some lights or signals for safety. So I'm
Regular
saying they
lights,
should
like
be
street lights.
low.
Street lights is what they're
Yeah.
talking about.
And,
No,
Flashing
they're also talking
beacons
about.
as well.
So there's
I
flashing
thought
beacons.
Caltrans had to have flashing beacons at any
No, no,
pedestrian
no,
crossing.
no, they
Is
don't.
that
this is
not
why
true?
we need it
okay.
look
So,
like.
sorry, so we're way off track here, sorry. We're on the letter for two-stage crossings. Let's hold it to two-stage
We have a
crossing. And I'm
motion
guilty of it too, I'm sorry. Let's hold
All
it
right.
to the two-stage crossing.
Yes.
Anyway, if we're gonna have any islands, I support that, the short islands, signal, if there has to be lighting, and, they should all be synchronized along the highway, so that,
Those are traffic signals, we're not
well,
talking about
it's
traffic.
part of it.
No, there's no traffic
Okay,
signals
so can we
proposed.
discuss this at the
No.
workshop on the 15th?
Yes, you may.
Okay.
This is a
Because
reason
I'm
why.
not in charge. Jim, you're up. Two-stage crossings. I promise not to divert again. It is very late, folks.
I just keep saying, build the damn freeway all the way through. The best thing. Two things, and now I forgot everything I said. One is there priority in building these? Because this is coming from south to north. So, or are they all built up once?
No, that's a great question. No one project has been prioritized over another. However, I think that's a really good question. I think it's gonna spark very interesting conversations. Definitely not tonight, but I'm definitely happy to engage in those conversations on another night. But I think that's a very interesting question, because as people have said tonight, there were a lot of locations discussed, and so prioritization, similar to what we did with the Highway 1 Safety and Mobility Improvement Study, where we gave priorities to certain projects, which is actually how these came about. I think that's going to be a necessary step going forward.
And then kind of added to that point, just the two guys that were here, tell them about all the grandiosa that's going to happen in the next 20 years. How do these get affected by bigger, wider freeways?
So, Well, I don't know anything about freeways, but as far as the two-stage
bigger, wider
crossings,
roads that they're trying to
as
do
far,
in these crossings.
yeah, these crossings are included in Connect the Coast side. So this study that is evaluating the crossings, as well as other projects, is informing Connect the Coast side.
So are these done first, and then if they decide to do something different, they get torn up and rebuilt?
It wouldn't work that way. Whatever's decided out of this project will inform the other one, and so they will mirror one another.
Yeah.
So one won't say, do project X, the other one will say, do project Y, and all of a sudden we're standing there saying, huh? They will be in sync, and they will mirror one another with regards to these projects.
They're being driven by the same agency.
Okay.
All right. Please tell me nobody else wants to make a public comment. Okay, hearing no more requests for public comment, I hereby close public comment, and I'm sorry, I'm not gonna have any more discussion, it's 10:40. We're an hour and a half plus our normal closing time. I wanna call for a vote. We have a motion on the floor to approve Dan's letter with a very minor amendment to strike the part that's been fixed. Does anybody wish to amend the motion? Okay, call for a vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All against?
Aye.
No abstentions? It fails 3-2. Thank you, everybody. There was a lot of good input. We will discuss this more in the future, I'm sure.
Adjourn?
God, I hope so.
So we have several more items on the agenda. If anybody has something they really think needs to make it on camera for tonight, I will hear that. Otherwise, I'd like to hear a motion to adjourn.
Are we gonna talk about future agendas as far as a follow-up on this, since we can't do it at our next meeting?
I will, that sounds like one we should cover.
So, a couple things came up. So, do we have a consensus here? The council feels like we need to have another meeting and possibly approve a council letter? Is that where we're at?
Got my support.
I personally do not feel strongly about that. I'm not opposed to it. If we do that, I would like it to be after we get the feedback from both next week's meeting and the survey summaries. Do we have an estimated date on which the survey summaries for the safe crossings?
No, we can run them, I can run them in 30 seconds, I just have to hit a couple
Well, the
buttons.
problem is there's a lot of comments that can't be tallied. We can just print them. That probably is good enough for
There's
us.
a lot of comments that can't be tallied. So,
Yeah, we would like to see the comments.
yeah, it'll give you, when you run the report, it will show you, say, Marauder Road, alternative 1, how many people voted for that? Alternative 2, how many people voted for that? All the comments underneath.
Okay.
That's good.
So after the survey period closes, please run the report and send it to me, and I'll send it out to the council. We'll also, are we okay with putting that on the MCC website? Is it public information? I'm sure there's no identifying information at that.
We'll have to redact some of the information that is on the report, and I'll work with county council, and my official answer will be, I need to discuss that with county council to determine what we can release and what we can't. I don't wanna trip over my own feet here, it is late, so that will be my answer, and I will let you guys know as soon as I talk to county
Okay, so
council.
it sounds like the earliest we could do this would be our second meeting in May.
The first meeting May is taken up entirely?
No, it's not taken up entirely, but it sounds to me like that reaction process might take some time. And I hate to put it on the agenda. We can tentatively put it on the May 13th agenda, and if we don't have it, then we
What else is
won't
on
have
that
it.
agenda?
The only other item we have on the May 13th agenda is the
Community
CCA,
choice.
the community power.
Yeah, the community choice
Well,
aggregate.
I'm in agreement with you. As I said earlier, I think that if we're gonna comment, I'd like to see those before we do that.
Right.
And, so tentatively, I think it's a possibility we might consider, and we could decide in an email if we want it on the agenda is all.
Sure, absolutely.
Everybody gets to look at the stuff, we won't discuss it, but we'll decide if we wanna have it on the
Okay, I
agenda.
will block it out for the May 13th agenda
Okay.
tentatively.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Any other items for upcoming agendas?
Okay, so what's tentative? What are we gonna do?
That we will draft a letter representing the MCC board members' points of view on the safe crossings and what we believe the community has told us.
And this is after the process is closed.
Yes, after the process is closed.
Will the county recognize that letter?
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna throw it in the round filing cabinet.
At least you won't tell us that you.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, no. Yeah, I mean, we'll acknowledge it once again. I mean, the preferred alternative report will reflect what the surveys are saying, which means the preferred alternative report will reflect if hypothetically 70%, I'm making these numbers up, purely hypothetical, 70% of people who participated wanted alternative 1 from Murata Road and 30 people wanted alternative 2, then clearly alternative 1 was the preferred, is the preferred alternative. Now, if the MCC was to send a letter saying, we want alternative 2, well, you're in direct conflict with what the survey information is telling us. So, you know, that's something that you guys have to balance.
Yes.
I would perceive it as an opportunity to discuss it, clarify things, if people had questions today, an
Yes.
opportunity to do that,
Mhm.
and also add in tweaks, for example,
Yeah,
my left
yeah.
merge things, you know, and
Yes.
consider
Right.
this, you know?
Absolutely, and,
Yeah.
you know, and then maybe that's the appropriate time to maybe have a discussion about prioritization.
Exactly.
The other thing I did want to also mention is that there's the additional, public workshop that's on the 15th of April, so I don't know if you're going to be there, but I mean, I think that would be, you know.
Oh, that'll be brought up, yes.
A pretty significant forum to, and if, you know, to your point from earlier, if there were lots of people that were in support of this alternative at Farallon, I mean, I would encourage, I don't know who those people are, but I would encourage them to be there and collectively, you know, raise that as an alternative. I mean, you had, as I talked to you earlier, I know that when you brought some slides and you talked about different cities where they've done it, and quite frankly, to hear you talk about it, but then to see it and they go, oh, well, that's what it looks like. Like, I think that that's really important information to have. So, at any rate, I was just like,
Okay.
I think that's
Well,
another.
All the discussion in the world after we're done. Anybody have any other items for future agendas? Okay, and I have a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, and Steve, thank you and PCTV for holding with us.
15 hours.
We're done.
Maybe that's a long day.
Nicholas.
I'm exhausted.